Why is this moment in American politics best understood not as right versus left, which is what I think most people think, but rather populist versus the establishment?
The media has changed, and that has led to the thinking changing in this country. And so my thesis is that it was always about populist versus establishment.
Can you define those?
Yeah, I can. But we never knew it until we got to this new media era. In the old media era of mainstream media, there was only one way of thinking. And it was, in my opinion, overwhelming propaganda. And they got you to think about it in terms of left and right. And then they lied to you about what's left and right. And most importantly, they lied to you about what was moderate or centrist. That was the greatest illusion that mainstream media ever did. We can come back to that. So in terms of what's populist and establishment, establishment is the current system that we have. So the politicians, the donor class, mainstream media, the powerful, and the elites. And populist is anyone who is for the average guy. Now, everyone will tell you they're for the average guy, right? But their actions show you otherwise. So for every cable news anchor is for the elites. They're not for the average guy. And I could prove it to you. I could prove it to you in every policy position they have, every framing that they do of a story, the way that they report stories, etc. So, for example, the average guy thinks that politicians are crooks, and they're right. No cable news anchor thinks politicians are crooks. So if you ask them about a specific individual like Trump, they might say, oh yeah, Trump. You know, if you get them off air and you get them talking about what they really think, maybe they say he's a crook or he's a liar, etc. But partly because they view him as populist. I don't think he really is, but that's how they view him. That's how he portrays himself. And so they think that's an anathema. I hate that. And so, okay, I can criticize Trump. Trump is a rare politician I can say anything I want about, right? But when you get to other politicians, Nancy Pelosi, oh, no. No cable news anchor on MSNBC or CNN would go off on Nancy Pelosi. Never going to happen, has never happened. So why? Because they're the establishment. They think, oh, she raised $1 billion from donors, which the average guy goes, then she owes a lot of donors, a lot of favors. That's basically $1 billion in bribes. Everyone at the New York Times and Washington Post and CNN and MSNBC think, what a wonderful statesperson and legislator. And in fact, her nickname almost for a long time, and it would appear in article after article, and on the Young Turks, we would show it over and over again. Master legislator, master legislator. It was an incredible, overwhelming propaganda to show her as like this angel and incredibly effective. And I was like, what did she ever pass? And I remember I was at a Politicon. I asked that question. Bob Shroom, who ran several of the Democratic presidential campaigns for Al Gore and honestly for almost all the losing candidates. And I like Al Gore, but the other guys were just a nightmare. Anyway, so he nearly sprung out of his seat on a panel in front of all these people. He's like, how dare you criticize Nancy Pelosi like that? Because that's the establishment mindset. These politicians are demigods, the donors are demigods, and that's all they ever serve. They never serve the people.
What's the core belief that underrides that? Is it that we need an elite class who are smarter that can help guide those who are less intellectually fortunate? Is that the driving thing, or is it just greed or something like that?
The answer is both. So what they tell themselves, because nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks, I'm evil and I'd like to do evil things, right? They have to tell themselves a lie first before they tell you the lie. So the lie they tell themselves is what some people call neoliberalism, which is, oh, of course, the educated elites know everything, and the masses are barbarians and ruffians, and we have to guide them along. But they don't know. They don't know that you have to pay more taxes and the rich have to pay less taxes because it's going to trickle all over you later. And us sophisticated people know that. We should have all the money and the power so that we can help you poor, uneducated masses at a later date. Okay, and that's called neoliberalism. That's called the establishment. It's called, a lot of different things, but it's the same idea no matter what label you attach to it. So, but they truly believe it. They think, oh, like the Greeks, when they had the banks collapsing and all the different countries were suffering. We were, but Italy and Greece were suffering the most. And what did they do? They hit them with austerity. You Greeks, you were naughty. You borrowed too much money from us. Now you have to pay us back, and your people have to suffer in order for us to get our money back. And that's the only way you could rescue your economy. And we're doing this for your own good. So shut up and take it, okay? And they really believed it. And they thought that the Greeks were irresponsible, etc. In reality, the bankers pushed those projects onto them. And yes, their politicians said yes, but it was part of this giant process by which they extract wealth from all these countries. So the underlying real reason that they believe what they believe is greed. And so here's how you connect those things. It's not that they're not more educated. They are, right? They have plenty of degrees, etc. So when they say, hey, we understand some of these complex ideas or policy positions a little bit better than the average guy, that's not necessarily wrong, right? But the part that the establishment is missing is that, yes, but do you really have other people's best interests in mind? Do you really have the average person's best interests in mind? Or are you super educated and super smart, but you're actually driving towards your own goals and your own interests, which are oftentimes diametrically opposed to the average person? And I don't think they realize that they're doing that. So a lot of populists think, oh, those elites are evil. No, they're in a bubble. And in their bubble, they think they're saints helping the average guy, but they got to help themselves first, right? And then it eventually, that trickle-down economics is such a perfect word, perfect phrase, because it literally, they think, well, we get all of the money and power, and eventually maybe it trickles on you, right? And they believe that that's how it should be. And so they don't think they're hurting people, but they are, because they actually rigged all the rules for their own benefit.
Okay, so the establishment, they are the people who are educated, who are some mixture of telling themselves a lie and actually wanting, at least as messaging to themselves and to others, that we want to help the average person, but the policies that they enact help themselves first and foremost, and what is supposedly meant to trickle down never really trickles down. Cool, I can wrap my head around that as what the establishment is. So what is populism?
So populism is appealing to the average guy and actually trying to serve the average guy. Now, unfortunately, it has a history of being co-opted by usually a demagogue who comes in and says, I'm going to help you guys, and then just helps himself, right? And so this is the history of politics throughout the history of the world, and it's so, so frustrating. But when populism is done right, it's beautiful. And so, that does happen from time to time, and I would argue that FDR did it right in a lot of respects. And everything's complicated, nothing's black and white. FDR did plenty of things that were wrong as well, right? But overall, on economic populism, he was terrific, and that's why he's beloved. And that's why the bills that he passed are to this day the most popular bills in American history. So populism says that we shouldn't first give it to the powerful and the rich. We should actually give it directly to in this case, the average American. And
when we say give it, are we saying give them policies that make their life immediately better economically?
Yeah, 100%. So a good example, I think, is paid family leave, right? So paid family leave just says you get roughly, there's other aspects of it, but the main core of it is moms get 12 weeks off after they have a baby. So that makes sense. The whole rest of the world has it. America doesn't have it. So why is that populist? Because it's giving a benefit directly to moms. It doesn't go through any other conduit. It doesn't go to her company, and then maybe out of the goodness of their heart, the company passes it on or doesn't pass it on. A lot of times what Republicans of years past, and still today, Trump's a complicated character, not a normal Republican, but normal Republicans would say, no, give a tax break to her company and they'll do the right thing because they're patriotic, which is horse crap. That doesn't mean anything. A company's not a person. It doesn't have any emotions. It's not patriotic. It's a machine built to maximize profit. So no, they're never going to give it to her unless they think it's to their benefit to give it to her, right? Mm-hmm. So populists say, no, I'm not going to give more tax breaks to the corporations or to the rich. I'm just going to give her paid family leave and she's going to get 12 weeks off. And if you don't like it, go pound sand. And populist is not just in policy, it's also in rhetoric. So I went to a couple of Ivy League schools, so it's not like I don't know how to talk like the elites do, and I'm happy to take them on in any intellectual debate that they like. But I talk like a regular person, and that's another thing that drives the establishment crazy. They think that that's so unsophisticated and like, oh, he's talking like an average American. Ugh! He didn't even use any SAT words in that sentence. They like a great example, so you know that I'm not doing just hyperbole or theatrics, is Adam Schiff. If you ever listen to Adam Schiff, now the senator from California, he's like a thesaurus, and like the elites love it, and they love Adam Schiff. They're like, oh, he's so smart. Oh, he's so great, and you know he looks out for them 1,000 times before he'll ever look out for the average person, right? And they think he's sophisticated, but in this era, Adam Schiff to the average person sounds unbearable, unbearable. And they're like, oh, Trump, he sounds like a dullard, right? I'm like, what are you talking about? Trump sounds like a normal person. And that's why they like him. So a good example of that is the McDonald's photo op that he did during the campaign. A lot of Democrats were like, look at that. He looks ridiculous. Like he would sell French fries. Do you know how bad he is to his own workers? Now, that's true. He's terrible to his own workers. And you can make that point without doing the bullshit, right? So no, he looked good. That was a good photo op. It's true that he's terrible to his own workers. It's true that he hired undocumented immigrants. It's true that he's against minimum wage. It's true that he would be against a lot of the interests of those McDonald's workers. But it was a good photo op. Why? Because it was populist. He put on a McDonald's, outfit. He gave it through the drive-thru. You see what I'm saying? That's the style of populism, and the elites hate it, and the average person loves it.
It's really interesting. So why then does populism become co-opted so frequently?
Usually people are so oppressed by whatever establishment is in charge in whatever country and whatever time period, because these are phenomenons that have been happening for time immemorial, right? So, and then someone comes along and says, I'm going to fix all that. I'm going to break all that. And I talked to Dan Holloway, who has a podcast called Drinking Bros. He's on the right.
Drinking Bros?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And Dan made a great analogy. He said, we know Trump's a bull in a china shop. You're not telling us anything new when you tell us that. And we know there's some things in that china shop he shouldn't break. But we hate the china shop so much that we're sending him in on purpose. And that's populism that goes in the wrong direction oftentimes, because a lot of things that shouldn't be broken get broken in that process. And so if you're a con man, and the right is going to hate this, but my job is to tell you the truth. Donald Trump, I used to think Donald Trump was an unsophisticated con man, but now I see the other con men, they're even more unsophisticated. So I now believe that Donald Trump is a sophisticated con man.
Interesting.
And so when a con man sees this great opportunity, this opening, they dive in it, especially when people are hungry for someone to go into that goddamn china shop and break as many plates as he possibly can. So if you don't know, Donald Trump A/B tested a lot of his messages. It's actually a clever thing to do. So he went on right-wing talk radio for several years. Dan Scavino, I think, explained this. And so he would test messages. He would test a pro-immigrant message and an anti-immigrant message, because he doesn't care. He doesn't care at all. He used to be a Democrat. He was pro-choice, all these positions, and he flip-flopped because he's not a principled guy. He doesn't care about it. He just cares about winning for himself, more money, more power, more fame. So he noticed, anti-immigrant tests better with the right wing. All right, I'm going anti-immigrant, right? And on down the list. So usually a guy like that will appear and they will gather a lot of momentum. And then unfortunately, a big percentage of the time, they take it in their own interest and not the people's. But like I said, there are those magical moments where you get a populist who actually does the right thing. And that's when you really have the best scenario.
Give me an example. You said there are some times, you gave us FDR, does it right. Has there been anyone in recent memory that's doing it right? What would Trump have to do it right? Like, what does that look like? Other than, I get it, like we need to do things that are good for the average person. But is there a principled way to do it? Or is it literally just reflect back what they're telling you they want?
No, there's definitely a principled way to do it. Here's an example that's a mixed bag. Andrew Jackson. So Andrew Jackson was a real populist, arguably maybe the first populist in American history. I'm not a historian, so if that's wrong, I'm happy to get corrected on it. But one of the first that I've certainly read about. And so he, for example, he invited people to the White House when he was president, like actual citizens. So no president had done that before. I'm not sure any president has done that since. And I don't mean just as like a tour. I mean, oh, we're having a party. Let's invite everybody in Washington. Okay, so he was a diehard populist. Now, Andrew Jackson's version of populism has significant downsides, as happens, right? He was very tough on Native Americans, and he was, vicious in a lot of ways in that regard, on race, etc. Again, in his historical context, he was still a pretty bad figure even within historical context, but obviously a different time than it is today, right? But he was a populist on economic issues in some ways that were good. And so that's a populist that's earnest, even though it has a significant downside and a significant upside. I would argue FDR is a populist that had largely upside. Again, there's plenty to criticize, internment camps, et cetera, right? But obviously enormous accomplishments, wins in World War II, Social Security, and on and on. So I would argue Lula in Brazil is a really, really positive populist. I could argue that Scheinbaum in Mexico is a really good populist. So there's a lot of examples of it going right.
Because I have not been politically really awake at all until, say, the last 4 years, I have begun to intuitively grope at some of these ideas without having the words to put to it. My audience will have heard me say this a gazillion times, but this sounds like what I call the dumb voter problem. So to use my words to explain what I hear you saying is, I think you can bifurcate everybody by what they think should be done with people they consider dumb voters. I understand some people think I'm the dumb voter. But what I think makes somebody an elitist is somebody who thinks that dumb voters need to shut up and be taken off social media, not be allowed to speak, not create disinformation, misinformation, whatever. Trust me, we know better. And we're going to take care of this. We got you. But they actively view themselves as knowingly right, that other people are knowingly wrong, or at least they know them to be wrong, even if that person doesn't recognize it themselves. And based on their level of intelligence and ability to successfully navigate the world, they need those people to not disrupt the narrative, to let a story be told about what this all is, whether it's this moment, whether what these policies mean, and that the other people need to just be quiet. Versus, and I will very much put myself in this camp wherever this means I fall, I don't trust myself, and I don't think anybody should trust themselves like that. So all I'm going to do is say, look, treat me like an AI. I'm going to give you a strong, sincere take. I'm not going to pretend I don't believe what I believe. So I'm going to say the things that I believe with the level of aggression that I feel inside. But I don't want people to just go, oh, Tom said it, and therefore I'm going to believe it. I want people to say, okay, I'm going to need a bunch of people like that to give me a view on this thing that we call truth that none of us can see clearly. And based on these sincere, very firm takes, I then am going to make up my own mind about what this thing is. And you can call it wisdom of the crowd or whatever you want. But I think, my view, you have to let even the people that you think are dumb and uneducated have their voice, say whatever they believe to be true. And then and only then, by battling those ideas out in public, can we as a very large collective of people begin to move in a direction that we think is most advantageous. Does that seem in line with what you're saying, or are we saying very different things?
I only agree with you 100%.
If that's all. Okay.
Yeah. So that's exactly right. And so I realized as you were talking, though, that that's part of the friction that exists for me in terms of being on the left and in the Democratic Party And as we do the Young Turks, that friction has been present for a long time. So what do I mean by that? My policies are on the left. And, we want to talk about populists. The nearly perfect populist in our lifetime is Bernie Sanders. So $15 minimum wage, the money goes straight to you. Paid family leave, it goes straight to you. Universal health care, you get the health care straight to you, right? All for the average guy, etc. So I'm on the left. But the problem is the Democratic Party is filled with voters in that first bucket that you described. That's disinformation. I know better than you. I'm more educated than you. You should shut up, and you shouldn't be allowed to say that. And I should get to say this, and et cetera. And a lot of policing of language and behavior, and that leads to a super toxic and damaging and counterproductive political culture, because what they're doing constantly, even though they don't realize it, is they're talking down to their voters. Like, you don't know, I know. And you have an obligation to vote for me. You'll see whenever a Democrat loses, they almost always blame the voters. So
interesting.
Yeah, that happened in this election too. Very first thing, and we know it's coming. So the Young Turks were ready, and we're like, here we go, roll the tape, right? And they said, oh, Latino men, they were sexist, and that's why they didn't vote for Kamala Harris. I'm like, Mexico is a female president. So I'm pretty sure that wasn't the real reason. And by the way, Latino men voted for Hillary Clinton by 31-point margin.
Whoa.
They didn't get magically sexist in 8 years.
Right.
You didn't deliver for them. It's not their fault. It's your fault. But a Democratic politician never sees it that way because of the mindset that you just described. They think that they definitely know better and that their voters owe them their vote. And that is a terrible political mindset. And that's why they just lost the popular vote, even though they have every advantage in this country. They have a demographic advantage. They have an infrastructure advantage. Now they have a money advantage. They have a media advantage. And they blew all of that because they have this imperious, unbearable attitude that they're owed power and that everyone must listen to them. By the way, I think the Republicans used to be like that in the past. And I'm really upset that the Democratic Party has gone more in that direction, right?
So does that happen whenever you get a preponderance of establishment Republicans or establishment Democrats?
Exactly.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So who do you have more in common with? Populist Republican or a establishment Democrat?
If you talk about policy, I'll probably wind up having more agreement with the establishment Democrat. If you talk about attitude, like way of thinking, ideology, philosophy, life philosophy, probably populist right. So, but what's perfect for me is populist left. And that was the main battle for the last 8 years within the Democratic Party. Bernie, the populist wing, versus Hillary, Biden, Kamala Harris, et cetera, the establishment wing. So Bernie has all of the actual left-wing policies, and Biden's like, oh, I'll do 10% of them if you push me really hard and if you beg and plead. But he doesn't really want to do them. And I can give you a lot of examples of policies he chose not to do because he never believed in them. He's from the corporate establishment wing. So that's the battle we've been having inside the Democratic Party. So sometimes people will hear me criticize Democratic politicians, go, oh, you must be on the right. Oh, you must be a Trump supporter. Or you must be this. No, remember the battle we've been having this entire time. Our side of the party has to win. If we don't win, we're going to have these unbearable guys lose election after election after election. So you can sense the loathing that I have for Democratic establishment politicians. But unfortunately, we have what I now call binary brain in this country. So our media has taught us you must either agree 100% with one side or 0%. And there's no nuance.
And they break left-right.
And it's left-right. That's right.
We'll get back to the show in just a minute. But first, while everyone else is paying taxes on their crypto gains, the smartest investors are using iTrust Capital's Roth IRA to grow their wealth tax-free. After what happened in crypto in 2022, you all know security matters. iTrust Capital keeps client funds off balance sheet and are never commingled. Never, ever. Your investments are held in regulated custodial accounts completely separate from their business. They've also eliminated all the barriers of a traditional Roth IRA. No monthly fees, just straightforward pricing, 1% for crypto transactions, and transparent rates for precious metals. Plus, you can buy or sell 24/7. As part of our collaboration with I Trust Capital, they're offering our community an exclusive bonus. Use code IMPACT when you sign up and fund your account to get a $100 bonus. Just click the link in the show notes and use code IMPACT. Don't miss out on tax-free gains. Choose I Trust Capital. This has been a paid promotion. Now, back to the show.
Hillary Clinton, the most establishment politician of our lifetimes. You have to agree with 100% of what she says. Otherwise, you support Donald Trump. But I don't agree that we should give everything to the rich and powerful and then have it trickle. I don't agree with that. Even though she's pretending to be on the left, I don't even think she's on the left. I think she's a right-wing establishment Democrat, right? Democrat used to mean left-wing, but I wrote in my book, Justice is Coming, about how the Supreme Court decisions allowed an avalanche of money to come in. And the Democratic Party started realizing, oh, the Republicans aren't the only ones who could take money from corporations. We can take money from corporations. And they let that money completely and utterly corrupt them. And so that's why I fight so hard against those guys. But it's got to be someone like Bernie that wins, because Bernie's earnest and actually cares about the average person. And I believe the left-wing policies are correct. So, but when anybody that hears this conversation, not anybody, but a lot of people who hear this conversation will go, oh, Cenk just said that he has some things more in common with right-wing populists than Democratic politicians. We knew it. He's a right-winger. He's a Trump supporter. He's MAGA, because of binary brain. They can't get into a simple conversation about there are two different political spectrums, left, right, populist establishment. So I am center-left, but I am very populist. And I get it. It's a new concept to a lot of people, but we got to get better. We got to get better. Otherwise, we're never going to fix the Democratic Party. And in my opinion, demagogues like Trump will just take what is basically an empty open field. He has no competition because his real competition was Bernie, and the Democrats killed him off in the primaries. So you give me any populist. I don't even care if they're a knucklehead. I don't care if they're not earnest. Just political strategy-wise, that person will beat an establishment politician every time, especially in this era. In the old times, no way. Why? Mainstream media would have crushed the populists. But mainstream media has lost power. So now, because of online media, populists can actually rise up. So the minute we have a Bernie-like figure on the left, they're going to landslide everyone. So, because in the old days, the only reason Bernie lost was because every cable news anchor, every reporter at the New York Times, every reporter at the Washington Post, they despise Bernie. And they don't, even though people say, wait, I don't get it. Mainstream media seems to be on the left or supports the Democrats. What do you mean they hate Bernie? But you see what they say and you read what they write and you go, wow, they do hate Bernie. Why do they hate Bernie even though he's on the left? Because he's a populist and they're establishment. That's why they hate Bernie. And the mainstream media has killed every populist left-wing figure's career. They are our biggest opponent, and they're a propaganda machine that enforces corporate rule on the rest of us.
This is really interesting, man. So I am always looking for what is the lens in the world that gives me the highest predictive validity. You're the first person that I've heard talk about this. So the world felt very naturally divided left-right. So I'll definitely want to hear your breakdown of where you think those ideas came from. But before we go to that, let me ask you. So had it been a Bernie versus Trump, so now we've got a Democrat populist versus a Republican populist, who would the media have gotten behind?
Trump.
Really?
Yeah. And in fact, it's not a question. It already happened.
Why?
So in 2016, Trump got several $billions in free media. Do you know how much ABC News talked about Bernie Sanders in the year 2015 as he went from about 2% to 48%? One of the most miraculous political ascents in American history. ABC News talked about him for 7 seconds.
That's a literal number.
That's a literal number. Okay. So because
was he up against Hillary at that point?
Yes.
But
yes.
Isn't that why they were silent? Because it's like, we don't want a populist when we can have an establishment Democrat.
100%. But they didn't do that for Trump. They gave him billions of free media. 3 reasons. Number one, he's a celebrity and they're obsessed with celebrities. They're like, celebrity, right? Most importantly, number two, they didn't take him seriously. They thought, it's a clown. We'll get good ratings, but he's obviously not going to win. They were positive he wasn't going to win. I said he would win the Republican primary in October of 2015.
Jesus. I was like, he's unelectable, literally up until I told my team, go home. It's not possible that this guy can get elected.
Yeah. On ABC's This Week with Stephanopoulos, right after Hillary Clinton's DNC, where she then at that point, she had about a 10-point lead. The convention had just ended. They had us predict who was going to win. I was the only one on the panel that predicted that Trump would win. And the rest of the panel laughed out loud. And I said, we're in a populist era and you guys aren't getting it and you can't see straight because you are the establishment. And they're like, that's this crazy guy. He thinks that clown Trump's going to win. No, he's giving us great ratings, but it's got no downside because he's not really going to win. But there's a third reason. The third reason is, what did Trump do when he got in charge? In the beginning and for most of his time, he might have said crazy things. He might have done crazy things. But at the end of the day, his one major policy accomplishment was massive corporate tax cuts. So he wasn't a real threat. Later, they perceived him to be a threat in that he only cared about himself, when a politician in that position is supposed to be a servant of the donor class. They're like, this son of a bitch. I probably hesitated for a second. This son of a bitch is taking all the money for himself when he's supposed to take the money and give it to us, right? Again, they don't think that way consciously because and the one thing I think you said a little wrong on what I said was 100% right is you said dumb voter, but it actually isn't dumb voter. It's all about bubbles. Everybody's in their own bubble and they cannot see straight. It's not because they're dumb. It's because they think that their worldview is the only worldview. And so that's what's creating a lot of these problems. So the establishment let Trump basically win with all that free media because they thought it was impossible. They thought it was good for their ratings. And they knew he was going to deliver for the rich because he's rich. Bernie was a much bigger problem because they knew he was not going to deliver for the rich. He was going to deliver for the average guy. And viscerally, they hated that. When I interact with people in mainstream media and I say the things that I say that supports Bernie, that's populist left, I can see the hair on their neck rising. Like you can't actually physically, literally see it, but you see it in their reaction. They start to do this. They get tense. And then their answers are much sharper, aggressive, and they feel like, who are you to say these things about us? And I can give you a great example. You could even see it online. I gave a speech in Washington, D.C. to the press club, National Press Club. Okay. So I go there and I give a speech about populism and establishment media and what they're doing wrong. And boy, did they hate it. And so they
don't like to be critiqued. What's the driving thing?
The president of the National Press Club then got up and said, we work really hard. I didn't say you didn't work hard. I said that you're seeing it wrong, right? They take personal offense at the idea that they are not objective. And the reality is they're not within a million miles of objective. And I could prove it. I mean, it's not close. So for example, they say, what do you mean? We're objective, we're neutral. Wait, hold on. How is neutral objective? What if you have an idea on who's going to win the AFC Championship game, and I have an idea on who's going to win the AFC Championship game, and you say the Bengals are going to win, and I say the Browns are going to win, but neither one is going to win because neither one of them are in the game, right? So mainstream media goes, oh, the correct answer is between the Browns and the Bengals. No, the neutral position between 2 points is not necessarily correct at all. That's just a neutral position. That is not the objectively correct position. So there's many different tricks that I could explain of what mainstream media does. And again, they don't know they're doing it. Guys, if you're out watching, don't think they're evil and they're going, we will now trick the American people. And a lot of the reporters aren't that rich, but they're in a groupthink and they don't realize it. And so, like, whenever they talk about a bill, a piece of legislation, right? What is the number one factor that drives what's going to be in that bill? I'll tell you, it's money, right? It's the lobbyists aren't spending literally billions of dollars for their health, for general charity, right? They're doing it to affect what's in the bill. Does it work? Absolutely. I could show you dozens, maybe hundreds of examples. They put pressure on, the bill gets changed, the bill's in favor of the corporations and not the people. Over and over and over again. Not negotiating drug prices is the most insane thing anyone's ever heard. It's the most anti-free market, anti-capitalist thing anybody's ever heard. But everybody treats it as perfectly normal. But much more importantly, in the articles about the legislation, they never mention the money. They go, oh, the beloved Senator Lindsey Graham. I know they don't say beloved, but it's in the framing, they kind of frame it that way. The honorable gentleman from South Carolina thinks this, the honorable gentle lady from Connecticut thinks that, and they had this debate, and oh, it looks like the Republicans won the debate. There was no debate. All there was is an exchange of checks. The donors give the checks to both sets of politicians, and they get what they want, and we get screwed. And if you work at the New York Times and you don't know that, that's embarrassing and to the point of almost humiliating. But none of them know it.
It's hard to believe that they don't know it. I think this may be one of the things that we see differently, which is that I don't believe, God, I don't want to believe that people can blind themselves that completely. That's a level of lack of self-awareness that I would find terrifying.
But Tom, I can prove it to you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
So it's not binary. Does the New York Times sometimes do great reporting? Absolutely. Can I show you hundreds of great investigative stories, et cetera, that they did? Yes. Right. So when I criticize the New York Times as an example, they get emotional and I get it. You know, I'm criticizing the place you work, then the place that you might love and believe in, et cetera. Right. And they go, what do you mean? Look at this great story we did on this or that, the other thing. But those are great stories. But when you're doing your political analysis, you could just look up in the New York Times all the times that they talked about legislation and how often did they say the controlling factor was donor money or lobbyist money. The answer is near zero. How often was it actually donor money and lobbyist money that was the controlling factor? Nearly 100% of the time. So if you create a theater for people and pretend that these political actors, and they're literally actors, are having an ideological debate and one side won the debate, et cetera, you have greatly misled your audience, your viewers, your readers. So, but they don't know that. And so I'll have interactions with a reporter and I'll say, you know, it's the money that controls yada, yada, right? And they'll say, yes, I understand that. And between you and me, I agree with you. So it's not like they're not aware of the concept, right? But money in politics is a different beat. That's not my beat. So my editor told me to focus on this.
Okay.
But money in politics is in all the beats. If you cover politics, money in politics is everything. But the editors say, no. That's a tiny campaign finance reform thing. No one really cares about it. It's a process issue. So we're not going to emphasize it.
That I get. But that all feels like theater to me. To your point about their actors, that does not feel like people honestly assessing the problem. This feels like people that don't want to pull at that thread because they know that motives are going to be swayed by that. Let's take what you and I do. So you and I both have to make decisions routinely about whether we're going to curb the things that we say based on advertisers. Speaking for myself, I'm fortunate that I could self-fund this for a very long time without advertiser money. So I'm never going to change what I believe to be true based on an advertiser, but I have lost advertisers. So I certainly understand how advertising dollars can get people to, well, maybe I just won't talk about that thing because I know advertisers are going to be a little bit weird about it. So even that, I see how it begins to nudge people. What I literally refuse to believe is that they're not aware that that is happening. They may want to think that they let it influence them very little or something like that. But the reason that guy can say to you, yeah, I know it's a problem, it's just not my beat, is because there's no way that they can trick themselves into thinking that the donor money doesn't actually have influence, even if they go online and say, now, admittedly, I'm just projecting, I'm mind reading, but I can't fathom a world in which that is a level of complete and total blindness. I think their emotional reaction is because part of them knows that that's the one line you can't cross. And they may have a mental gyration about why it's not immoral to do, but that they're unaware of it, I just can't wrap my head around that.
So they are, but let's
unaware.
Let's talk about who they are, though.
Yep.
So when you talk about a junior reporter of the New York Times, they're younger. They didn't grow up with television. They grew up in online media.
Mm-hmm.
So they're way more aware than a reporter would have been 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when they're just getting brainwashed by mainstream media. There is no money in politics. It never affects anyone. These politicians are honest. They're never affected by the money. But the senior reporters and the senior editors, that's the most important part. And remember, who's the most important? The one above them is the publisher, right? And the publisher hires the editor hires the other editors, they hire the senior reporters, and it all flows down from that mindset of it's an outrage to think that these politicians are crooks. If I was here with a senior New York Times editor, and he was sitting right here with us, and we told him, right? The politicians are crooks. They take money from the donors and they do whatever the donors tell them. He would be outraged by that idea. He would think that we're radicals and we're weirdo, conspiracy theorists. I've literally had reporters tell me, are you saying that the politicians are voting based on the millions of dollars that they got? Because that sounds like a conspiracy theory. I was like, are you insane? The conspiracy theory is that they are not affected by millions of dollars.
Right. No, agreed. Have you seen A Few Good Men?
Yes.
Okay, admittedly, I'm simply building a mental model. I don't know any of these people, and so of course I could be wrong. That caveat aside, you could peel my soul open and see that I actually believe what I'm about to say. That all of these politicians make a lot more sense to me if they are Colonel Jessup, who has a belief in his soul that we just can't handle the truth. And you need people like me to protect you. And so, yes, I'm going to take donor money because that's how this game works, but I am doing it for you. And if you don't have people like me standing between you and China, you and a world that wants to see you destroyed, you're a fool. It has to be me. You want these people giving us money, and you have to know that I'm moral. I'm not going to do things that aren't in your best interest. So yes, I take money, and yes, I do the right thing, but they're not fools. They know what they're doing. And I really believe if you crack them open, that's what you're going to see. I don't buy for a fucking second that Hillary Clinton isn't at that Colonel Jessup level where she's like, she may believe that she's truly doing it all for the little people, but holy hell, there's no way she's like, oh, I'm not influenced by this. Oh, no way. I don't buy it.
So again, it requires nuance. So here's a good example of what the model you're talking about. I think that Dick Cheney is Colonel Jessup, and I loathe Dick Cheney, right? And so apparently everybody in the country outside of Kamala Harris does. And
it was a shocking turn of events when they were celebrating that. Yes.
God, Democratic establishment politicians are so stupid. Like I'm not supposed to call them stupid. I just told you not to call them stupid, right? They're in their bubble, but that bubble is so dumb, right? How Dick Cheney polls at 13%. What part of that is complicated? And they're like, no, we're going to get the Republicans in the suburbs. But you said that in 2016 and Hillary Clinton only got 7% of the Republican vote after you spent all of your money chasing after Republicans you were never going to get. And then you did it again in 2020 and Biden only got 6% of the Republican vote. You did it again in 2024 and Kamala Harris only got 5% of the Republican vote. They are impervious to facts and reason and logic because they're so deluded by their own bubbles. So Dick Cheney, but to go back to your Colonel Jessup example, probably thought, I don't know which of these theories he believed in, but peak oil or something along those lines. We need boots on the ground in the Middle East because oil is such an important natural resource that we need to be able to control it. If we have unfriendly governments that can get together, and what if they get off of the dollar? The dollar is even more important than oil. So yeah, I know that they don't have weapons of mass destruction. I know they not only did they not do 9/11, that they're mortal enemies of Al-Qaeda. It's not like Dick Cheney doesn't know that. He definitely knows that, right? And he made a decision. And this is my inference based on overwhelming evidence that I've seen, that, yeah, I'm going to lie to the American people because they need me on that wall, right? So he got himself to believe he's the great hero and savior of America, and if we hadn't gone into Iraq, blah, 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 right? But then when you talk about other politicians, they're not all like that. Like Ted Cruz is a slime ball, and he knows he's a slime ball. He knows that he's not going to eventually help the American people. He couldn't give a rat's ass about the American people. I'll give you again, this is not just, oh, I don't like Republicans or I don't like the right. No, this is all based on facts. So we've been covering news and politics for over 2 decades now. So all of these stories have accumulated. So on Ted Cruz, if you remember, he did not endorse Donald Trump in the 2016 Republican convention. He gave a speech and never endorsed Trump. And that was a big controversy. And they're like, whoa, because they were the 2 main competitors at the end. And if you remember, Donald Trump had insulted his wife and basically insinuated that she was ugly and that his father killed JFK. I mean,
very Trumpian, yeah.
Yeah, it's enormously Trumpian, exactly. So Ted Cruz, out of principle, decided that he wasn't going to endorse Trump. And then like 2 weeks later, I mean, instantly, I don't even know if it took 2 weeks, he's phone banking for Donald Trump. And he's on television saying, Donald Trump is the greatest and we have to elect Donald Trump and Donald Trump is the best. So what the hell happened? Well, I read what happened. What happened was after the speech, he goes up to the suites where all the donors are. And he goes to his main donor, the Mercers, Robert and Rebecca Mercer. They have given him, at that point in that primary alone, $13 million. What people don't realize is Ted Cruz is not a politician. He's a servant. He's a servant of the Mercers. So he goes up to their suite, and they slammed a door in his face. And he's shell-shocked by it. And they say to him, look, we put the money into you in the primary, that we invested in you, and it didn't work out. Trump won. Now Trump is going to give us the corporate tax cuts we wanted, so now we're backing Trump. So shut up and back Trump. And then once he got his orders, he immediately turned around and said, oh, I love Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the best, etc. He doesn't think he's Colonel Jessup. He doesn't think that you need him on that wall. He thinks, oh, money, money. Oh, I'm Ted Cruz. He's a total freaking slime ball. He knows he's got to go lick the ass of Robert Mercer. And so he goes and licks that ass. It's not to be on a wall. It's not to protect anyone. It's not to do anything, but look out for his own self-interest. And as loathsome as Dick Cheney is, and as terrible as his actions were, and as much as it cost the country, I would argue that he had a better intent than somebody like Ted Cruz, who only cares about himself and doesn't even have any delusions of being Colonel Jessup. You see what I'm saying?
I do. I don't know anything about Ted Cruz, so I don't have a read on that. But
but you could take Ted Cruz and 98% of politicians are like Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is just the most flamboyant, one of the most flamboyant of them.
Help me understand the left versus right split. What causes that?
I mean, partly it's a matter of genuine policy disagreements. And I actually think it's partly a matter of nature, that you're probably born conservative or born progressive.
Give me as much detail on that as you can. I find that very compelling.
And then, but there's also a cultural element too. So I'll start all the way in the beginning. I think that we have hardware and software in our brains. So our hardware is our DNA. So that's hardwired in, and there's nothing you could do about that. Your brain is structured in a certain way. You have certain proclivities, etc. Then our software is all of our cultural influences that inform us, educate us, oftentimes deceive us. And so what are the cultural influences? Your community, your family, your friends. Family and friends are very different influences, right? And very, very importantly, media. And so now let's talk about software first, and I'll come back to the hardware. in software? Well, you have the red states where you have a lot more conservatives or Republicans, and you have the blue states where you have a lot more people on the left. Part of that doesn't have to do with software. If your hardware says no change, you're going to stay in your hometown. You're not going to go to the coast. If your hardware says you like change or you need change, you go to California, you go to New York. So the left starts to go to the coast more because they're more in favor of change. But the main part is, in California, you have media, you have culture that is very left-wing. In Alabama, you have community, culture, family that is very right-wing. And so that's your software. And so when you're in a room where everyone thinks the same thing, you know that psychology test where they have a series of lines and they ask you which one is the tallest line, the longest line. And what you don't know is that they told everyone else in the room to pick the second tallest one as the tallest one. And then they see how many people defy the crowd and pick the actual longest line. And the number is very small.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, and so when you're in Alabama or you're in Los Angeles, you have to be super strong to get past the cultural influence, the software that you're imbued with every day, as these people around you all say, well, of course the Republicans are right. Of course the right wing is right. Or if you're in LA, of course the Democrats are right. Of course the liberals are right. And, oh, you don't believe that? Are you a Trump supporter? And they look at you like you're evil and et cetera. So in LA, you're worried about being labeled a Trump supporter. In Alabama, are you a liberal? Do you dress up like a girl in the middle of the night? No, I don't. I'm a Republican. I'm right wing. So that software is super powerful, let alone when you get to the media level where it's on steroids. So what's your hardware? Hardware is free. So what I tell my friends on the left is, the right wing are not bad guys. Sometimes they'll react to us in a way that you go, well, they sound like bad guys. I mean, we're talking about H-1B visas, and some of these guys are saying, don't let the goddamn Indians in. They're not real Americans. That's a bad guy thing to say, right? And that's attacking me, et cetera. So how can you say that they're not bad guys? Well, first of all, so of course some of them are, right? And that's a different conversation. But really, it's not that. The main part of it is they circle the wagons. Conservatives circle the wagons. So they believe in stability. They believe not as much change, nice and easy. And we look out for our own. So they're terrific to their family. They're terrific to their community, their church, etc. But if they perceive you as outside their wagons, then that's bad news. Their guard is up and they view you as the others. They're going to fight you. They're going to fight you 2,000%. Well, a lot of us are outside their wagons. Whereas for progressives, people on the left, they're more open to change, just structurally, like their DNA, their brain is more open to change. So they're like, oh, I don't have to stick with tradition and culture and what society tells me to do. Then the second part of it is our wagons are much larger. So to me, whether you're Indian or you're white guy from Alabama or you're a Martian, I don't really care. To me, I mean, Martia's not a great example because to me, if you're human, you're human. And sometimes Republicans will challenge me. Are you saying that you care about this as much about the people in Bangladesh as you do about Americans? Yeah, I do. Now, if I'm running America, I'm going to care more about Americans, right? And as a political figure in America, I got to look out for American citizens first, right? But it doesn't mean I hate the people of Bangladesh, and it doesn't mean I think that they're any less than us. I think they're just as human as we are. And they should have the same rights, same everything. Now, if you have a right-winger in the room, he's not going to want to be racist and tell you, oh, yeah, the people of Bangladesh are inferior or I don't give a shit about them. But really, he doesn't give a shit about them. And a lot of them, to be fair to them, are very honest, and they'll tell you that. They'll be like, that's their goddamn problem. In fact, Trump said it the other day, on a thing he doesn't really mean, but they asked him about the ceasefire in Gaza. And, will the ceasefire last, et cetera? And he said, it's their war, not our war. That's a very right-wing mindset. That's their business, not our business. I circled my wagons. And that's why he says America first. That's why he's always talking about we're going to deliver for his base first before he delivers for anyone else. Hey, if you didn't vote for me, I don't care about you, and I might not give you disaster relief. But if they tell him, oh, in Orange County they voted for you, I said, okay, then Orange County's fine. That's good. Because Orange County is inside his wagons. LA's not inside his wagons, right? But for progressives, that's such an anathema. Like if you said to someone who's truly on the left, hey, they got hit with a tornado in Alabama, but they didn't vote for us and they don't like us, and should we give them disaster relief? Any real leftist would say, of course. They wouldn't even understand the question because the guy in Alabama is inside our wagons.
It's interesting. The tribal nature of it all makes that feel not necessarily true. I've seen when people tribe up, there is an innate part of our hardware that I think drives people to say they're not on my team. And there was a lot of like when BLM and everything first kicked off, there was like, hey, you either get on board with this or let it burn. So I think people tribe up on both sides, but let me lay out my hardware, software, because on that we're really similar, but I don't know if we draw the same conclusion. We might, I'm just not sure yet. So I look at the left and the right without the nuance that you've now given me about establishment versus populist, which I think is important and is very much, I'm updating my thinking as you've presented that. But I'd come into it always, okay, the left and the right need to exist. It's the tension between the two that make us function well. And just as marrying somebody who views the world different than me, that's actually made my life better across a whole host of dimensions. And I learned very early on, I don't want to make my wife think like me, and my wife shouldn't want to make me think like her. It's in this ability to hold dynamic tension where we're able to navigate well. And so think of a kite and a string, right? So the string, without it, the kite just flies off into nothing, crashes. And the string without a kite obviously just lays on the ground. So it's the dynamic tension that allows it to stay afloat. So from an evolutionary standpoint, you've got evolution is trying to make sure that you have kids that survive long enough to have kids that have kids, right? So, okay, so now I've got to get us to survive in an environment where there's no refrigeration. This is one very simple, it's not the only thing. There's no refrigeration. So if we go on a hunt and I kill more than I can eat, I'm either going to let it rot or I can store those calories on your body. And so now I'm like, hey, you're part of my tribe, eat some of this, I want you to have it. And so in us is this desire to help people. So we'll call that the left. There's this compassion of like, nobody left behind. I want to make sure that I serve other people because it helps the cohesion of the group. It helps me survive later when it's going to be my turn. And so this reciprocity from an evolutionary impulse standpoint is very advantageous. The catch is that if you're always looking out for other people, then you get what's known as the free rider problem. And so that's where the right comes in. And the right says, okay, hold on a second. We need personal responsibility. We need people that they're going to pull their own weight. And so now if you get just the right, it's going to devolve into madness. Everybody's looking out for themselves. There's no group cohesion. If you get just the left, then you get this free rider, what I call the barnacle problem. And if you've ever seen a turtle get covered in barnacles, it just sinks and it dies. So you need the tension between the two. And if you only had one, they're both going to break off into pathology, regardless of what side you're on. It just becomes nonsensical. And so I learned this actually in business because I had these two guys I respected a lot. One was a CEO type, one was a COO type, and they just were cruel to each other. And I was always like, why, what's happening? And they both thought the other person was an idiot. And I was like, you guys are two of the smartest people I've ever met, but you have different roles in this company. And once you understand that you want that dynamic tension, you want to think differently, you want to view these things differently, and you find a path that works ultimately for the goal that you guys agree on. I won't drag us into that fractal right now, but the dynamic tension serves everybody. So when I look at the left-right divide, in myself even, I'm trying to remind myself, I don't want everyone to think like I think. I'm very happy to have other people who think like I think, but I would not want that to be the only way because we need that balance. So to me, and I think to you, that's an echo of evolution. Definitely grant you there's a software layer as well that can be extremely compelling, but good luck fighting against somebody's like, if they are like pushed hard to one way or the other, even with all the software in the world, you're probably going to have a hard time pulling them too far. But that's how I look at it. So I never respond well to the vilification of the other side, even if I don't agree with their policy because I'm like, the one thing I know better than to do is to trust myself. So I want my voice to be heard. I'm going to lay my most compelling arguments, but then I want everybody, and I do really have a hard time explaining this idea to people, even people I consider dumb or other people consider dumb because I don't trust my assessment, they all should have a voice. And now it gets put before the people and whatever people decide we do. I won't fractal on direct democracy, but the comment section should know that, yes, I'm aware of the problems of direct democracy, but we'll set that aside for now. How does that land? Am I missing something obvious? We'll get back to the show in a moment, but first, the #1 regret I hear from successful entrepreneurs is not about failure, it's about hesitation. I've helped thousands of entrepreneurs start businesses, and they all say the same thing: I wish I had started sooner. And with Shopify, starting a business has never been easier. Their drag and drop templates get you up and running fast. Their social media tools let you sell anywhere people are scrolling, and they handle all the complex back-end stuff like shipping, taxes, payments, all from one dashboard. This lets you focus on what matters. With Shopify, your first sale isn't just possible, it's inevitable if you take action. Established in 2025 has a pretty nice ring to it, doesn't it? If you agree, sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/impact, all lowercase. Just go to shopify.com/impact to start selling with Shopify today. Now, let's get back to the show.
No, I think I totally agree. So let me break it down one by one. What you're describing is balance. I describe the same balance in my book, Justice is Coming. And I say, look, I'm coming at this from a left-wing perspective, but here's why we need the right wing. Because you can't steer this ship without both sides. And there's a whole host of reasons why you need the right wing. But I'll give you the easiest one to understand. Winston Churchill was right wing, and he was brutal to India and not a great guy overall at all. But during World War II, you needed someone to make hard decisions and to sacrifice some troops knowing that they're going to die. And you needed that kind of guy to take charge and go, okay, now let's go kick their asses, right? And so I respect that, and there's a time for that. But if all you do is, let's go kick the ass of everyone, whether it's right or wrong, whether they're Nazis or poor innocent Indian villagers, that's not the right way to go. But sometimes you're not subjugating Indian villagers, you're fighting Nazis, right? It doesn't mean a left-winger can't. FDR was a left-winger, and he beat the Nazis too. Stalin was definitely a left-winger, and he beat the Nazis too. But at that point, but you could argue, well, sir, like, to have a conversation about whether Stalin is really right-wing or left-wing because he's a dictator, blah, 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 but leaving all of that aside. And so, and I can give you a dozen other examples. So I totally agree with you that we need the balance. But that doesn't mean that both sides are always right. No, one side can definitely be wrong and dramatically wrong at different times. And it's not just the right wing. I mean, the communists eventually devolved into Stalin, etc., and Mao, and they were massively wrong, right? So, but when you look at American history, so your point about tribalism is also definitely correct in my opinion. And so, well, we had a right-wing tribe that formed in the South that said that, and so whenever I bring up history, the right wing instantly catches feelings. This is not about you. You didn't do it. Your family didn't do it. Just calm down for a second and let me say the statement, because I know they're already reacting. The minute you say the South, you better not say Southern traditions about peach cobbler. It's not about slavery. Come on, guys. Come on. Of course it was about slavery. Of course it was about slavery, right? And what was slavery? It was vicious. And it was saying your tribe is worthless. Your tribe is furniture. And your babies is a commodity, like a purse that I'm going to sell. So, and white people are awesome and superior, and we don't have to work. You have to work for us and get nothing, okay? So, okay, now I'm giving you a super extreme example. And by the way, slavery wasn't just in America. It was all across the world, and different races did it. So again, don't catch feelings. It's just an example. So, but there were tribes there. And yes, that tribe happened to be right-wing and is still right-wing. And so that tribe was wrong. It was fundamentally morally wrong. So just because you need the left and the right doesn't mean they're equally right at all times in all circumstances. In fact, a lot of times the left is right, sometimes the right is right, and that's how you steer the ship, not by being right at the same time, but being right at different times, right? So, and I hear what you're saying about the tribalism these days, and I think that it has gotten worse, and I think it is driven by media. And I think it's beginning to be driven by the algorithms, which lead to audience capture, which then says if you deviate a little bit from what your audience wants, the algorithm's going to punish you. And that creates an enormous incentive to say, oh, yes, 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 of course, Trump is right about everything. Of course, Biden is young and dynamic and totally right about everything. He's the best candidate in the whole world. He's 35 years old. Of course he is. Of course he is. I'll tell you whatever the fuck you want to hear. Right? And what does that do? Tribalism, tribalism, tribalism. And that tribalism now, especially these days, is you must hate the other side. If you don't hate the other side, you're not one of us. And I loathe that. I can't stand that. And that's what's destroying the country.
Yeah, there is no doubt about that. The algorithms are driving a lot of... it exacerbates the situation greatly. Anybody that runs the kind of media companies that we run have to be very cognizant of audience capture. That is for sure. Given the fascinating moment that we're in with social media, with somebody like Trump being able to leverage a very watchable personality, love him or hate him, he gets eyeballs. How do you think of Trump? What does he represent in this moment? I know you've been talking about, hey, if I could get a meeting with Trump, I would take it.
Yeah.
And that hasn't exactly made you popular on your side. How do you think about Trump? Why would you take a meeting with him?
Yeah. Look, we're crazy. We challenge our own side all the time, algorithm or not.
The we in this is the Young Turks.
Yeah, Young Turks, TYT. Young Turks is the flagship show live every day, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube and all the other platforms. TYT is the network. And the network has many channels, many shows, many hosts, dozens of hosts. So Young Turks is just the flagship. But so as a company and as the flagship show, we often challenge our own side. I remember we lost a lot of subscribers when I started challenging Obama from the left. And we fought so hard to get Obama elected against Hillary Clinton in the primary at first, and then against John McCain in the general election. So our audience is filled to the rim with people who really love and support Obama. And then I started to say, yeah, I like a lot of what he's doing, but guys, I got to tell you, drilling in the Gulf is not a left-wing position. And it's not a good idea, and it's bad for the environment, et cetera, et cetera. And then the Gulf explodes, right? So, but before the Gulf BP disaster in the Gulf, I just give that as one of dozens of examples again, where I challenged Obama from the left. And then I wound up having problems with that at MSNBC when I hosted there. And we lost viewers. We lost paying subscribers. But then eventually people come back, and they come back in even larger numbers because they see, oh, they were right. They weren't against our tribe. They were actually trying to get our tribe to do the right things and trying to get our leaders to actually serve us instead of serving other interests, right? So that's the nature of this game. And so I get it. And every time we defy our audience a little bit, then what happens is the leeches come in and and they're like, oh, great. We'll pretend to be more pure than them. And we'll be thoughtless and mindless. And we'll say Trump is 100% evil. Will never do anything good. And he's a Nazi and a racist. And he didn't call him a Nazi. That's it. He loves Trump, right? So what's the reality? The reality is, and here I am going to upset both sides again. Trump, generally speaking, con man. And to me, a very obvious one. But I'm not in the right-wing bubbles, right? And so does that mean that everything he does is bad? No, not necessarily. You have to judge every single thing by its own merits. So, he did criminal justice reform. He did criminal justice reform more than the Democrats did. Did mainstream media give him credit for that? Not really. They almost never talked about it. But Anna and I were like, that bill was pretty good. It was kind of left-wing, right? But these days, if you say a bill that Trump passed is good, even if it really is left-wing, people say, Nazi, right? Racist. Wait, hold on. But he passed a bill that we would want Democratic presidents to pass, right? So now, but then he passed corporate tax cuts for the rich and for corporations and generally supported corporate rule. Deregulation, they say, oh, it's freedom. Lewis Powell, in his famous Powell memo in 1971, made that up for the Chamber of Commerce. He's like, oh, when we want deregulation, which for our own businesses so we can take advantage of people, we should call that freedom. And so all the way to today, Trump's like, oh, freedom, I deregulated the oil industry so they could take all the oil, not share any of the money with you, create climate change that's going to destroy your house in a hurricane, put that cost all onto you, take $30 billion in subsidies, take all of the money, all of the advantages, and we'll call that freedom. That's not freedom. That's bullshit, okay? Regulation is another word for law. And if you believe in the rule of law, you should believe in regulation. But that doesn't mean that all regulation is good. The question is how much regulation. You can get carried away and have way too much regulation. You could have way too little regulation. So we have these nonsensical conversations. I mean, I'm so tired of it. Even not only in cable news, but even in the New York Times that's supposed to be sophisticated and intellectual. They'll have these garbage conversations about, are you pro or anti-regulation? That doesn't make any sense. What regulation are we talking about? If the regulation is don't murder innocent people, then I'm pro-regulation. If the regulation is I'm going to come take half your house for some bullshit reason, then I'm anti-regulation.
So what are they groping at when they ask a ham-handed question like that? Is it tribal signaling, or do they really have a base belief that regulations are just a code word for breaks for corporations? On
an individual level, they don't even realize they're doing it. And if you challenge them on it, they'd be like, oh, yeah, I'm not sure what I mean by more regulation or less regulation, right? Because it's a factually nonsensical point. Great progressive Matt Stoller worked in the Senate, worked in Washington a long time. He told me this once. It stuck with me. I give him credit for it all the time. He says, oh, regulation. Cenk, I'm going to do a project at my house. What size pipe should I buy? I'm like, I don't know. What do you need? What's the job? Right? And he's like, exactly. Right? You don't know if you need more or less regulation unless you know what the job is. Right? So I'll give you one last example. My dad ran a small business in New Jersey, bought and managed a commercial building, and they would inspect elevators 6 times a year. And he's like, that's crazy. It's overrated. We have to spend money. We have to spend time, energy, etc. So I said, yeah. So you don't want them to inspect elevators, right? And he said, no. They should inspect elevators twice, not 6 times. I said, why do you want them to inspect it at all? Every time they inspect it, it costs you money. He said, because sometimes in Turkey, they didn't inspect elevators and then they fell. Okay, so you don't want them to fall. You don't want people to get hurt. You don't want people to die. You need regulation. You just don't need over-regulation. So that's a sophisticated conversation. But to your question, they're in groupthink, the reporters, the politicians. So they haven't thought any of that through. They just go with whatever talking point that the software that was written for them. Somebody at some point told them to be against regulation or for regulation, and they just mindlessly repeat that without ever thinking, what's the job? What are we trying to solve for, right? So now back to Trump. So I'm a little bit more hopeful about Trump in this term, which is really pissing the left off. Like, you're not allowed to be 1% hopeful about him. And I'm not 100% hopeful about him. I'm not 50% hopeful about him. 12%, 20 max, maybe. And the other 80% is going to be terrible. It's going to be things that I don't agree with, corruption, blah, 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 right? But so why? Because his base is different now. Because his base is getting their news from different media. So they're getting different software. So in the old days, when I went to go on a right-wing show, I would get Sean Hannity talking points nonstop. That's all I would ever effing hear. Okay, they had the same talking points as Fox News, and they all said the same thing. They were all robots. I wouldn't go on right-wing shows because it was intensely dull. You just yell at each other back and forth, talking point, useless, right? Now you go on right-wing podcasts, you go on right-wing online shows, everybody has a different opinion. Patrick Bet-David has a different opinion than Tim Pool, who has a different opinion than Joe Rogan, who has a different opinion than Dave Portnoy, because they're actual human beings. And they're not driven by this media industrial complex and the groupthink that it comes with it. So if you're on the right wing in the old days, you all believed whatever Rupert Murdoch believed because he came down from the mountaintop through Fox News, right? And what did Rupert Murdoch believe? The rich should get everything. Everything should be tax cuts and deregulation. And that's still a main driving force in the Republican Party, and that's why I'm not a Republican. Okay, but now you have the bros. So Rogan, Portnoy, etc. But those guys, they don't think the same way. They have no reason to support corruption. They're largely pro-choice. They're not religious fundamentalists. They're not corporate groupthink guys. So we might disagree with a whole bunch of their opinions on trans rights or maybe even on immigration, etc. But wait a minute, they're pro-choice. So why do I hate them for having the same position as I do? I don't have to hate them for that. Now the tribes are getting a little bit mixed up. And I love that because the tribes is, as we've been talking about, the tribalism is causing the problems, right? So now when I go on a right-wing show, and almost every right-wing show I've gone on is anti-war, I then come back and report it to the left. Guys, I got great news. The right wing has turned anti-war. They hate Dick Cheney like we hate Dick Cheney. And they're like, we don't believe you. And in fact, that's it. You're a Trump supporter. Because the tribalism's so ingrained.
Do you think that's inherent to the DNA hardware of people on the left, that they are very good at consensus building and keeping people in the group? Like, what is it that drives that? Because the right feels like the exact opposite, where they're nonconformists, they're a little bit maybe cowboy, but they have their own set of problems, but it feels very different than the like really intense purity tests that you find on the left.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that, which I don't know if it's interesting enough to get into in the parts that I agree with you on, but overall I disagree. So no, I grew up a Republican because I watched mainstream media and I believed the bullshit of peace through strength and balancing budgets. And then it took me a long time to realize, wait a minute, they never balanced the budget my entire life. The last Republican who balanced the budget was Dwight frickin' Eisenhower, right? Oh, they don't want to balance budgets. They just want to give tax cuts to the rich who are their donors. So, okay, I figured that out, et cetera, right? But back then, so I switch over to the left and I become a Democrat. But back then, the Democrats were the punk guys. They were the guys who did not conform. The Republicans were like, conform! You must obey. That was a very, very Republican way of thinking, a very right-wing way of thinking. Now, the policies have roughly stayed the same, but the attitude is totally switched. That's why in the very beginning of the conversation, I said, attitude-wise, philosophically, like not in terms of politics, but in terms of how I act in the world, I relate a little bit more to right-wing populists than Democratic establishment, because the right-wing populists have become punk rock, the cowboys as you described, and they don't like the authoritarian nature of the government saying you must do this or you must think that way. That used to be the left. That used to, and the left was like, we're not going to conform. That was what the left was known for. And that sense of revolution and rebellion and not listening to authority. And the right wing was, you must listen to authority figures. Now it's flipped. Well, I don't want to listen to authority figures. I think the authority figures are full of shit. I can't stand them. And as we talked about earlier with neoliberals and the establishment, the authority figures are not working on our behalf. They're working on their own behalf and on behalf of the donors. So I can't stand that those authoritarian dickheads have moved over to the Democratic Party. And lo and behold, how do you see that actually surface? Hey, look at that. There's Dick Cheney on the campaign trail with Kamala Harris. Those are the guys we were fighting, the authoritarian jerks we were fighting in the first place, who told us, oh, no, we know better. Oh, the evidence of them having weapons of mass destruction will be a mushroom cloud. Obey! Otherwise, you're a terrorist-loving scumbag. Support the troops. You must obey. That was Republican 101. Now that sumbitch has moved over to the Democratic side, and I can't stand it. So that's why it's not. It wasn't always this way. The parties flipped in that sense, and the parties flip from time to time. Like the Republicans used to be the party of civil rights under obviously Lincoln, and the Democrats had the Dixiecrats, and they were the more racist party. And then after the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, then that Lyndon Johnson, Democratic president, got passed, then Richard Nixon came up with a Southern strategy. And I talked to Pat Buchanan about this when he was on MSNBC and I was on MSNBC. And the strategy was go get racist voters in the South who hate the civil rights movement. The Democrats are giving them up, so let's go pick them up and get more voters. When I asked Pat Buchanan about it, he said, yeah, we had a good 40-year run. So
interesting.
Yeah.
You've put a lot of pieces on the table, and the fact that these things move around and there's no static Democrat Party, Republican Party, what is the, like, if I were to look at Trump now, if you're, call it 12 to 20% optimistic, I'm 60 to 70% optimistic. But what would you and I look at and say, he's breaking bad or he's doing well? Like, what, my North Star is very simply human flourishing, for the largest number of people possible. So assuming yours is something along those lines, how do we judge whether Trump is moving in the right direction or not?
Yeah, I think it'll be relatively easy to see. So first of all, why do I have that 12 to 20% optimism in Trump? Because of one thing, he likes to be popular. And that's not a bad trait for a politician to have. So Biden, for example, his policy on Israel got down to 20% in popularity.
Youch.
Yeah. And he's like, I don't care. I don't care if we lose the election. I will fillet the donors no matter what. I serve the donors, period. I don't care how unpopular I am. He got into the low 30s in approval rating. And I'm screaming, you cannot win an election if you're an incumbent in the 40s, let alone in the 30s. But they don't care about being popular. They only care about pleasing donors. Again, it's not just Democrats, establishment politicians. Trump, on the other hand, cares about being popular. So if one person, that's why I said, yeah, I'd definitely meet with Trump. If I met with Trump, I can show him how to be popular. And there's, oh, that's haughty. It's a bullshit. Give me one chance. Let's work on one thing together. And I can make it more popular and more popular and more popular because it's not rocket science. Read a fucking poll. Paid family leave is at 84%. How stupid is any politician not to pass that unless they're owned by the donors who tell them, no, corporate interests don't want moms to have any time off, right? And so
paid family leave, that's the first one. So if I'm going to guess based on the things you've said that this is going to be, how do we get, I don't know if you'd use the word benefits, but how do we get benefits, money, not sure what the right word is, directly into the hands of the average person?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we start with paid family leave. We're in the meeting with Trump. We're advising.
Yeah. Yes. Paid family leave is definitely something that I would advise them on, and you've got to do it right. And there's a certain way to do it. I think it's be easy. I can get, if Trump said, Cenk, you are now the enforcer for paid family leave, I want you to pass it. I can get it passed in 2 weeks. And then people will say, oh, outrageous, this guy, how arrogant. No, guys, it's at 84%. Only an idiot couldn't get it passed, or someone who's corrupt and never wanted to pass it in the first place, which describes almost every president we've had. 84%. If you can't get that passed, you're the most incompetent politician in the world. What do you need? 86%? 96%? How deeply incompetent are you? Right? So it's not a matter of incompetence. They don't want to pass it. You give me one person who wants to pass it, and we pass it like that overnight. What do? It's so easy. You put the politician on the spot like Trump does. This is another good quality that Trump has. He misuses it for his own advantage. Representative Wilson in South Carolina said something mean about Donald Trump. That's it. Eliminate him in a primary. And he does. And he's gone forever. Instead of saying he said something mean about me, if you said, oh, Representative Wilson, you're going to vote against paid family leave? Last fucking vote you'll ever have. Go ahead. I dare you. Vote against it. I fucking dare you. Right? You'll pass it instantly. it'll almost by acclamation, okay? Because nobody wants to get singled out as the corrupt piece of shit working for corporations instead of for American moms, right? But no one ever puts the spotlight on these guys because they're all corrupt. It's maddening. And there's a couple of honest people like Ro Khanna and Bernie Sanders, and then they don't say anything either because, oh, it would offend their fucking Democratic colleagues.
Now, let me ask you a question. Paid family leave, is that a good idea simply because it is popular? Or when you look at your North Star, do you go, paid family leave is critical for my North Star?
Yes. So it is both intensely popular and intensely beneficial. So every other nation on earth, not just developed nations, almost every nation on earth has paid family leave because it's insanity. It is brutal not to have paid family leave. So a lot of people that are in media and in politics, they're in the upper class. So they get paid family leave. They don't realize 85% of Americans don't have paid family leave. You have to use up all of your vacation time. You have to use up all of your PTO, everything you've got to be able to get a couple of weeks with your baby before you go back on the goddamn assembly line. You go back to Burger King, otherwise you're going to go broke, etc. Right? I think it's Estonia that has 82 weeks of paid family leave. We're so much richer than Estonia. How can we afford it? Of course we can afford it. We're just choosing to brutalize our own citizens because we live under corporate rule. So that's one example. But if you want to say the one thing that you'll be able to tell if Trump's going in the right direction or wrong direction is Netanyahu just made a deal for the ceasefire. That was a big present to Donald Trump. He could have made that deal at any time. Hamas had already agreed to that deal all the way back in July of last year, right? So Netanyahu's the one that was holding it up. And as Trump comes in, he gives him a big thank you gift. Here, it'll seem like you brought us the ceasefire. Now, what is Netanyahu going to do next, since he just gave Trump something? Plus, Miriam Adelson gave him $137 million. Her husband in previous elections gave him $200 million. And they are adamantly right-wing Israeli supporters. So all of these interests are telling Trump, okay, for now, you look like the statesman. Later, we're going to collect. What are they going to collect? Well, Netanyahu loves starting wars. So he'll probably either he'll try to start a war with Iran and make us fight it or pay for it, or he'll try to annex the West Bank or northern Gaza. And both of those will create significant conflict. And then at that point, every corrupt son of a bitch in Washington will come and say, oh, it's our special ally, and we have a moral relationship with them, or blah, blah, blah. No, they all got paid. AIPAC was the #1 donor in this election cycle. Hundreds of millions of dollars in bribes that we call campaign contributions. So when that happens, and Netanyahu comes calling and says to Trump, okay, now make these American sucker citizens pay for my wars, because we're a special ally, and we have a Judeo-Christian heritage. I once talked to a rabbi. He's like, I don't remember that Judeo-Christian heritage about 80 years ago. They just made that shit up for political purposes. Anyway, so at that point, if Trump goes, yes, we're going to join the conflict on Israel's side, or we're going to pay for all of their wars, my prediction is that his right-wing base is going to go, not this time. We're sick of this shit. Okay, you keep telling me special ally. I don't know what the fuck that means. They have paid family leave in Israel. They have universal health care in Israel. And we're sending them our money, and we can't afford basic stuff here in America so they could kill more Palestinians. No, not because the right wing cares about Palestinians or Muslims in general, right? Of course, some of them do, but that's not a driving force for them. They're going to just say, no, I don't want to give any more money. And at that point, is Trump going to go, I don't give a shit about you guys. I serve the donors, right? Then he goes in a bad direction. And then he can spiral. If he's going in the wrong direction and people keep attacking him, the more they attack him, the more he'll spiral, right? Or he could do something that no politician in American history, as long as I've been around, has ever done. He can go, hey, Netanyahu, you think you're fucking me? Wrong. I'm fucking you. Thanks for all the money. Thanks for all the gifts. I'm Donald Trump. I stiff everyone. Okay, no, I'm not paying for your wars. I'm going with the MAGA base. We're out. That's your war, not my war. If he does that, then he's going in the right direction. And that'll be very popular if he does that.
So when he said that comment, that's not our war, even though when he said it, it sounded like he thought it was a little bit callous. It's also the direction that you think he needs to move in to not be beholden to the donor class.
There's some on the left will say, no, he should support the Palestinians. I know. He should be Mother Teresa, but he isn't, right? And so he's not going to, out of the goodness of his heart, go, oh my God, those poor Palestinians got killed so badly and slaughtered so badly. Oh my God, Israel's starving them to death. Oh, I'm so worried about that morally. Trump doesn't think that way. He doesn't, that's just not a thing he cares about, right? So he's not going to do it out of the goodness of his heart. And since he's never going to help the Palestinians, and no American politician is ever going to help the Palestinians, I'll take neutrality all day, every day. Just stop sending our money to them. I know Israel will continue to brutalize them, but at least they'll have a fighter's chance of at some point getting a balance of power so they can get to a peace deal. It's not because I'm against Israel. In fact, I think that peace deal would finally create a safe haven for Jews, which was the whole point of Israel. But instead, they have these monsters that are in charge now who are like, no, more land, more war, kill them more, right? And so that doesn't help Israel. It makes the whole world hate Israel. And even worse, it makes the whole world hate Jews. And I hate that. I've got Jewish family. I've got Jewish friends. So it's wrong in every direction. So if he just got out and stopped sending money to Israel, that would be an enormous win.
Okay.
And especially, sorry, one last thing. Because without American money, what, Israel's going to fight a war with Iran by itself? No, it's not. No way that they start that war unless they think we're backing them. So, hey, we just prevented a war. That's a giant win.
Do you think this plays the same if it's the Ukraine, or is there a special case in Israel?
No, it's a special case in Israel. Ukraine doesn't have the same American donor class, doesn't have any of those particulars. Ukraine hasn't controlled both the Democratic and Republican Party my whole lifetime. No, Ukraine is just random. Israel's a thing of its own. But I don't want anybody to misinterpret. Every donor has the same kind of power depending on how much money they put in. So the drug companies are 4 times more powerful than AIPAC because they put in, usually, not this election cycle, but usually at least 4 times and oftentimes way more than AIPAC. So they're the most powerful lobby in the country. The oil companies are huge. There's all these different lobbies. The Israeli lobby is like 4th, 5th, 6th in a normal election cycle. So there's no like boogeyman, oh, they control everything. No, it's not like that. They're just a normal, super powerful donor, and the donors control everything. It has nothing to do with race, religion, or anything.
Right. How do you read the fact that Trump has RFK set up to be the person interfacing with the drug companies? Is that a sign that he doesn't give a fuck about that donor class, or?
No. If you go down the list, get out of Israel, do paid family leave, I can give you half a dozen other things. The last couple where he would get to be a hero, the ultimate prize is if any politician, and yes, this includes Donald Trump, actually got money out of politics, they would be the biggest legend this country has ever seen. They would build statues of them in every city, okay? And if he ever found that out and realized that that was really true, then he might think, "Wow, statues of me in every city. That sounds pretty good." Right? So there's potentially a way to push him into doing that. But it's unlikely that he's going to go in that direction, partly because he needs someone to guide him in that direction. Or not even necessarily guide him, but just to suggest, hey, what if we did this? What if it was, you see how it's popular, right? But all the people around him care about their own self-interest. They all have their different agendas, and this guy wants to run for governor, the other guy wants to be vice president or president, the other guy needs that donor class, and that donor needs deregulation. So they're all like pigs at the trough. And Trump, he doesn't mind corruption, so he's enabling all of that. But if he chose not to, and he could, because he's a wild card, then he can go in a positive direction.
I'll be very interested to see how it plays out. He talks very openly about like, hey, got a lot of money from these guys, and so we're doing this thing. It's really interesting to see. I have not heard him make any noises about getting money out of politics. Has he?
No, not at all. No. And look, remember in 2016, his most popular plank was drain the swamp. So whenever he said drain the swamp, the crowd goes nuts, all right? The right wing hated corruption. Now, in the old days, they didn't hate corruption. They loved Mitch McConnell because Sean Hannity told them to love Mitch McConnell. And Mitch McConnell was the heart of darkness in corruption. And by the way, same for Democrats. Nancy Pelosi took the same $1 billion that Mitch McConnell took, and she's the heart of darkness on corruption on the Democratic side. But if you tell a Democrat that, oh my God, how dare you? Nancy Pelosi's an angel. Really? Same money, same promises to donors, and you think she's an angel? And you think it's just a coincidence that the Democratic Party couldn't get paid family leave passed, couldn't get minimum wage passed? I can, again, a dozen bills that poll at above 67%. 2/3 of the country says, yes, I definitely want that. And Pelosi and Biden took billions, and the Clintons took billions to not do those bills while pretending to be in favor of those bills. And mainstream media came in and said, oh, they're trying really hard. There's just no way to pass a bill at 84%. Oh, no, you'd have to be at 112% to pass a bill. I mean, they're just such American heroes, blah, blah, blah. I'm so fucking tired of it. So back to Trump. So he realized drain the swamp was a good talking point, and it worked really well for him in 2016. And if you notice, he lost in 2020 when he stopped talking about draining the swamp. Okay. Why did he stop talking about draining the swamp? Because the entire time he was president, he was filling the swamp. He's like, you get a tax cut, you get a tax cut, you get deregulation, you get deregulation. He's like Oprah handing out cars, right? So right now, if you told him get money out of politics, he'd be like, what are you, mental? That money's coming to me. I'm not getting it out of. But if there was an honest advisor, right wing or otherwise, that said to him, brother, you're not up for re-election. You don't need any campaign contributions. That frees you to actually do the thing that is the single most popular thing in America. 93% of Americans think that politicians serve their donors instead of their voters.
93%.
93%. By the way, 93% of cable news anchors think that the politicians serve their voters instead of their donors. I made that last number up, but because it's actually 100%. But okay, so he has no inclination in that direction, and no one around him has any inclination in that direction. They all love that money, and that money is what got them to the top, just like it got Pelosi and McConnell to the top. But he actually does have an opportunity, since he's not going to run for re-election, that he could do that, whereas no other politician would.
I have a base assumption that Trump is thinking legacy, and that the only way he sees his legacy being cemented is if he is followed by somebody from his crew winning the next election. So while he isn't going to run for re-election, I think he is going to try to set things up for it to keep going. So now the question becomes...
I don't think so.
No?
I don't
you think as long as this is good, we're out?
I don't think Trump
doesn't
cares.
Feel true. Why do you think he's going so hard in his first 100 days? Just to... I've got 4 years. I need to do something cool. And that's just that.
He wants to be popular. And that's a smart strategy. As I talked about it, I think I talked about it in the beginning, the optics of him signing all those executive orders was amazing. And it animates his base, and it makes him more popular within the base. It makes him look more active. With Democrats, you have to push, right?
But do you think he's trying to look more active, or he's actually trying to be more active?
Look, I mean, so does he really care about ending birthright citizenship? I don't think so. And I think he's doing that as red meat for the base. So I don't think he's animated by any one of those policies. I think he's doing it because he thinks that that's what people will like. But I don't care. I don't care what animates him. But the reason I interrupted, though, was because if you said to him, it's really important for your legacy for J.D. Vance to win, blah, 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 blah. In my opinion, he's like, who's J.D. Vance? Like, he doesn't give a shit about anyone that isn't named Donald J. Trump. So he's not going to care about J.D. Vance. He's not going to think of his legacy in that way. He's going to think of legacy in terms of what did Donald J. Trump do?
Let me give you a different take. Tell me where I go awry. I think it's going to, and look, I'm planting a flag, so we'll find out if I end up being right or not. This is my read of the situation. Donald Trump wants to echo through the annals of history. He wants to be up on Mount Rushmore. Part of him probably believes that he already deserves, or is certainly on that path, But he understands that he's going to have to really do something effective over the next 4 years. And that if you really want this stuff to carry on, because 4 years isn't going to be enough, you've got to have somebody coming in behind you. Now, I don't think he cares who it is. So it doesn't have to be J.D. Vance. Maybe he's the least likely in Trump's mind. I have no idea. But it is going to be somebody that is extremely loyal to Trump, that will say, it is due to the glory of our godfather Trump that I have ended up here. And, I want to thank the voters, of course, but I think we all know I never would have made it here without Donald Trump. Like, I can imagine him having these fantasies. Now, to pull that off, he's got to do things that are very popular. I think you're right that he has a pull towards, I know how to read the room. And so the thing that motivates me isn't sort of objectively moral or right or anything like that. It's, I am here at the will of the people, and I'm going to do things that they think are awesome. And look, there are going to be times where I'm just going to override them because I know best and I've got to do this to get this thing done. And, but he is so aware that being a man of the people that you aspire to be is this 1-2 punch that's impossible to beat. So when he's at McDonald's, he's still in like a $3,000 suit or a $10,000 suit, whatever. But he's rocking the line and he's making jokes and he's very funny and he's driving the trash truck. And so I have a feeling he really understands that if I can make the economy boom for the American people, if I can begin lowering inflation, if I can put more money in their pockets, that is nothing I could do will make me more popular than that. And then if I make sure that I'm followed by somebody that also is going to reinforce all my legacy and everything that I've been building, then there's a real shot that I'm going to be remembered. And so that is my gut instinct of what's going to drive him. I think he's going to move furiously. I think he's going to continue to surround him by the best and the brightest entrepreneurial executors to see if he can actually pull this stuff off. Now, whether he gets mired in the realities of politics and then, like the fighter who falls back to his brawler ways just because he starts getting frustrated, that's very possible. But the energy that I see is somebody who's actually trying to pull something off.
I think you're projecting. I think you're projecting on two fronts. One is on the legacy and the person who follows him. I don't think he thinks of legacy as any other human being than him. And as traditional politician like Biden would think, oh, who's going to follow me? And Obama, oh my God, such an egomaniac, obsessed with his legacy. How do I appear? How do I appear? Okay, I need to have this person win after me, so my legacy. That's a very normal politician, right? I don't think Trump's a normal politician. I don't think he cares about anybody else and would not perceive any other person who follows him as part of Trump. He only thinks Trump is part of Trump. And so it's hard to, who's right? I don't know. But,
no, this is fun because time will tell, right?
Yeah,
so we're about to watch it all play out.
I mean, look at what he did to his last vice president. They told him, they're chanting, hang Mike Pence.
Oh, make no mistake. If he thinks somebody's being disloyal, he will cut them out as fast as you can say, get rid of them.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
So then that's why I think you're thinking about legacy in the wrong way. Although I understand what you're saying. He does care about legacy, just not by extension, just whatever he does. Secondly, because that goes towards his ego. So I agree with you on that. So the second thing is you're thinking, well, if he delivers for the American people, then he'll be more popular. Because that's how you think, right? Because you're a good person and you think, hey, if I deliver, then people like me, etc. We saw in his first term, he didn't do any of that. He just thinks what's good for me. And then if it turns out that I'm popular, great. But I'll give you an example. So he pressured Powell at the Fed to make sure he kept interest rates as low as humanly possible. But if you keep interest rates really low when you're president, that's going to be to your advantage and arguably the American people's advantage because low interest rates are generally a good thing, right? Keep the economy humming. But they have a big downside, which is that if you keep them too low for too long, it could contribute to inflation. And especially if inflation is going to come, it then pours fuel on that fire. So it's not the only reason why inflation came, but it definitely was problematic that they had kept those rates too low for too long. And so if Donald Trump actually cared about the American people, he would have had a more balanced approach to the Federal Reserve. But he doesn't. He thinks, gives a shit what happens after I'm president. I need these 4 years to kick ass on the economy, because when I go up for re-election, I'm going to say the economy was great. And if it blows up on the next guy, who gives a shit? So like you're putting these moral thoughts into his head that I don't think he has.
It's interesting. I'm not trying to put moral thoughts into his head because I don't think he's that kind of creature. What I see now, I admittedly was not paying super close attention in 2016, so I don't have a sense of who he was and what he did. So I'm really clocking him as when he started running for office this time.
Okay.
Watching him there, and I'm taking a big cue from the people that he's surrounded himself with. So if you remember, the big question was, will this guy who burned through everybody in the first term, will he be able to get people around him that really are high quality people that are going to help him really run a government? And I'll admit, when I saw the inauguration, I had two thoughts. One, oh shit, this really is what an oligarchy looks like. You have the richest people in the world just off his shoulder. And so I was like, okay, I get why people are being paranoid, and it's good. I want people to be paranoid. But I also saw the greatest operators of this generation. I mean, just absolutely unbelievable operators. Now, whether they can get along from an ego standpoint, I don't know. And we're going to see. Whether those people are fighting for things that are going to be good for the middle class or not, I don't know. We're going to see.
I know.
Let me finish this, because if for nothing else, I want to be able to play this back in 4 years and see if I was an absolute lunatic or if I got close. And I think he believes that the people really they want change. They are pushing back against ideology that I've done a whole spiel on why I don't like the phrase, the woke mind virus. But given that they will use phrases like that, I'll just shorthand it. The American people don't want that anymore. We're going to drill, baby, drill. And you're right. He's going to run everything hot. And he's going to drill. And if that has impacts on climate change, he's not really going to worry about it, for sure. But it will be good for American energy independence. We will be able to sell that energy elsewhere in the world. It will put us in a strong economic position. If we can find a balance between tariff as cudgel to get the deals done that we want and actually get some money on some of the tariffs, there will be a brief period of inflation because there's not the easy thing to switch over to once you kill some of these products through tariffs. But it will encourage people to come into America in terms of manufacturing. And we must, if we want to be isolationists, we're going to have to bring manufacturing back. If we're going to go into a legitimate Cold War that almost certainly will end hot with China at some point in the next 15, 20 years, we're going to need to bring back that manufacturing base. So he's going to have a good, true story there. He's already got Masasan to contribute $100 million for sure, potentially up to $500 billion. Sorry if I said $100 million, $100 billion, possibly $500 billion. Masasan, who is Japanese, said, "It is because of you, Mr. Trump, that we are doing this deal." Now, that's clearly a line that he once said because it got talked over at one point. Masasan made sure to repeat it. So that felt very theatrical, but nonetheless is like, okay, here's a guy that people want to appease. He's bringing in global dollars into the US. And so I see somebody who looks at the American economy and goes, hold on, we're the biggest, we're the baddest motherfuckers on planet Earth, and we're going to start acting like it. And we're going to push people around, and it's going to be a little short term. There's no doubt. There will be a backlash to all this stuff. You cannot go bully people and not expect that at some point that's going to come home to roost. That's where I think the short-sightedness of Trump will come back and be problematic down the road. But I think it gets him 8 years, 4 years of him plus 4 years of whoever his successor is going to be. And that's probably about as far, I mean, he'll in his mind be like, it's going to go on forever. But in his mind, he can believe, yep, for sure, we're going to get somebody else reelected. And I don't think people give him enough credit. He does get the gist of how this stuff works. If you push him on the details, it's going to fall apart. But he gets the gist of how this stuff works. And so meaning the economy. And so if he's able to make us more independent, make a lot of money off of our natural resources, convince people to, some people read it as rape Alaska, but to utilize Alaska to not only drill for oil, but to drill for rare earth minerals and things that otherwise we'd have to go to other countries for. I mean, hey, you are using our resources, which is going to make some people deeply uncomfortable, but it will make us economically more powerful. And I am just utterly convinced at the end of the day, the only thing anybody cares about is, are you making my life better and giving me hope that my kids' lives will be better? And if you do that, they will go along with literally the most horrifying shit ever. And so I think that he's going to capture that fervor, turn it into real results in people's pockets, and people can be like, yeah, word, this is dope. And again, I think the rubber band snaps back, and I think that there will be prices to pay. But I think that's 8 years from now. It's my gut.
I think there's an 80% chance none of that happens. Okay. I'll come back to the hope of the 20% that we've been talking about. That some of that will happen. But you're projecting competence on him. You're projecting like an ability to know what the right policies are that I've never seen him have. You're projecting competence and a little bit of good intent on the people around him, which is I've never seen. So let's start with the great operators, the oligarchs that are behind him, right? I agree with you. They're great operators. Bezos and Zuckerberg, it's amazing. Elon, Starlink and SpaceX are wonders to behold, right? But they're great operators on their own behalf. I've never seen them be great operators on behalf of the American people. And to be fair, that's not their job, right? So their job is to create these giant companies and make literally more money than anyone has ever seen.
Literally.
So the idea that the Bezos and the Musks of the world are going to go, hey, you know what? I mean, I was on a major competition with the other guys on this podium to be the richest man in the world, but I don't care about that anymore. I want to operate on behalf of the American people. I got that at 2% in terms of likelihood. I've got them thinking, I'm going to use this to beat Bezos and be number one at 98%. So what is the first thing Elon's going to do? He's going to deregulate his own business. Guaranteed. Now, he says he's going to cut waste, fraud, and abuse by using Doge, the thing that he named after his own, coin, right? His own product. It's unbelievable.
The comments are not going to like that classification. I get what you're saying. Doge technically isn't his, but yes, anyway. His
blah,
pet.
blah, 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 blah. You can make any excuses you like. Okay, and in fact, if you're going to get angry about that, wait till you get a load of the next thing I'm going to say. The major thing that they are going to do, the number one thing that Trump did in his first term was the biggest corporate tax cuts literally in American history. Added over $8 trillion to the deficit. Balanced budget. He doesn't care about balancing the budget at all. He added more to the deficit than anyone did. Okay.
Undeniable.
Give more to the rich, give more to the rich, give more to the rich, give more to the rich. That was his main driving force. Why? He's rich. Everybody he knows is rich, right? So self-interest. So this time around, through crypto, they're going to rob so much money from the American people, and there's going to be an unbelievable rage about that when it hits. That could be an absolute calamity.
Do you mean as meme coins or just the celebration of crypto?
And so this is why people get even more angry, because I have no idea what scheme they're going to come up with, but it might be the Bitcoin reserve where they take fake money that isn't real at all, and then they have the US government back it, so then it becomes real. So I had all this fake money, and now the American people have to pay for my fake money with real money. What the? No, I didn't sign up for that. I don't want to pay for your dumbass Bitcoin or whatever it is. You want to go have fun with Bitcoin? Go have fun with it. You want to, and a lot of people have made good money. God bless. It's a free country. You do whatever you like, right? After all the stuff that the right wing has talked about, we don't want the government to do this, and we don't want government regulation, and we don't want big government. If they say the government should then come in and and guarantee the Bitcoins and the meme coins and the blah, 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 and all the different crypto. And they go, no, now we should have FDIC cover it. No, 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 no. Are you anti-government or are you not anti-government, right? And remember, the whole thesis of crypto was the government's bad. We don't need the government. We don't want the government. We don't want it regulated. Now, all of a sudden, I'm hearing, oh, the government should create a reserve. The government should guarantee it. The government should do this. The government should do that. We're making predictions, right? I predict the largest robbery anybody's ever seen. And then when the right-wing base realizes they're the ones who got robbed, they're going to be mad. Okay. And the left wing already hates these guys. So I don't know what that creates, but that is a massive iceberg head. It doesn't have to happen. And I'm not saying it's guaranteed at all, right? But if you think that Elon Musk isn't looking to take whatever he has in crypto and find a way to add to his already massive wealth, and that isn't driving him, but charity and general welfare is driving him, I mean, a sucker's born every minute, okay? If you think Bezos and Zuckerberg and all of these guys are like, all of a sudden, I care about the American people. I see that they have selected Donald Trump, and I am here to help. This has nothing to do with my financial interest. I just came here to help. Get at, like, come on, guys. Please don't be suckers. I'm telling you right now, when Democratic donors come in, they're not here to help you. They're here to order the Democratic politicians to do as they're told. You know that that's true of Democratic politicians. You know it's true of old school Republican politicians. But you think that Trump and Elon Musk are the one exception? The guy who ran a fake university and a fake charity, that's Trump. He had to pay a $25 million fine for his fake university. He had to pay, I think, $2 million fine for his fake charity. That guy cares about the American people and doesn't care about himself. That's just nuts. He's a politician. Okay, so again, I think that there is a part that it could go right, but look at the things that you mentioned. I'll break it down into two categories. One is things I don't agree with, but that are relatively popular these days in America. So if you're on the left and you don't want them to ravage Alaska, that's a sad day for us. That ship has sailed. It's going to happen, and the American people aren't going to mind that much, okay? If you don't want, significant immigration reform, sad day for you. That ship has sailed. Right? And you mentioned a couple other things that, yes, you're right. The American people agree with the right wing on that these days. They agree with Trump on these days. So they'll do that. Those are easy wins. Their base agrees. The general population agrees. Their donors agree. Okay, now how can you tell if they're honest actors? Well, if you want to cut waste, fraud, and abuse, number one, the Pentagon's sitting there loaded with pork, and the right-wing base agrees. It's pork, 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 pork. Don't give me this bullshit about support the troops. You pay them $20,000 a year, and trillions goes to Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, etc., right? So if they cut the Pentagon significantly, I'll say credit where credit is due. They delivered. $30 billion in oil subsidies. Why the fuck are we giving the most profitable companies in the world our taxpayer dollars? If you're mad about the $4 billion every year that goes to Israel, you should be fuming about the $30 billion that goes to the oil companies. Subsidies? Why the fuck are we giving them subsidies? Maybe they needed it 100 years ago when the industry started, but they don't need it today. That $30 billion is a goddamn robbery, and they take it out of your paycheck. Is Elon going to really cut that? Is Trump really going to cut that? Well, the proof's going to be in the pudding. We're all going to see together. If they don't cut it, they were full of shit. Drill, baby, drill wasn't for our benefit. It was for the oil companies' benefit. And you know Trump. He says it. So oil companies, give me money. I'll let you drill anywhere. He says, well, I was against electric vehicles, but then Elon gave me a strong endorsement. Now I'm in favor of electric vehicles. I was going to ban TikTok, but Jeff Yaz, 15% owner of TikTok, gave me a couple $1 million. Now I like TikTok. Okay, so he's super transactional. He's just going to deliver for the people who give him a shitload of money. And so those are the oligarchs sitting on that stand. Our only hope for you not being monumentally wrong is that somehow some decent person gets in the room and says, Donald, forget all these guys. You already won. You don't need any of the oil companies. You don't need Elon Musk. You don't need Zuckerberg. You don't need any of those guys. All you need is to actually deliver for the American people. That way you'll be super popular. The brother is 98% ego. You have to appeal to his ego, but if you do and you show him that being popular is the best way to feed his ego, then you've got your lane in which he could do a lot of wonderful things. But he's never shown that. So that's why the left wing is not wrong when they say, Cenk, you're in fantasy land. He's never done that. I know you think you're seeing something in the right wing base. You're seeing something in Trump that might get to that result, but it's awfully hard for us to see it since he's never done it before.
Yeah, this is definitely something that is going to play out in time. I think you're right that he is driven largely by ego, but as of right now, the thing that will feed his ego is to get money in the pockets of everyday Americans. Those are the big promises that he's made. And if he does it, he would be hugely popular. So the only thing I'm trading on is that he'll actually do that. Now, we'll find out fast enough if he does or doesn't. So it'll be interesting to watch. I think one thing that, okay, so first I have to plant for my own audience. So I'm going to get lit up in the comments that I didn't say anything. So Bitcoin as fake money versus fiat as real money. I won't bother dragging us down that path right now. I would just say, dear beloved audience, you and I disagree on that. I certainly see fiat as the far more problematic money than Bitcoin, even without needing you to believe that Bitcoin is real and fiat is fake. Just that fiat is far easier to manipulate. But my take.
So can I just real quick on that? And
sure.
I grant everybody that I'm not an expert on it. And so then you can pile on more, or you don't know. I'll just say real quick, there's different buckets here. So the meme coins like Trump's meme coin, trash, utter trash. It's just speculation. It has no intrinsic value, no nothing. It's not a currency. It's
aggressively true.
Okay.
Meme coins make me very sad.
Okay, good. Totally agree. I get that Bitcoin is a currency and not the same as a meme coin.
Most people are going to say it's not a currency. It's a store of wealth. Some people want it to be a currency, but that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, but it's a different category than meme coins.
Correct.
Right?
Wildly so.
Yeah, and you could attach any label you like to it, but I understand it. And then when you get to the US dollar, for example, and the Federal Reserve, I'm not saying that there aren't problems. There's significant problems there. So the Federal Reserve is run by the New York Federal Reserve that makes the main decisions. Well, who makes the main decisions for the New York Federal Reserve? Their board does. Well, who's on their board? The CEOs of the 7 major banks. The Federal Reserve isn't serving us. It's serving the 7 major banks.
Agreed.
Yeah. So don't get me wrong. I understand the problem with the Federal Reserve. I understand that currency has issues too. But nevertheless, we're based on that system. And that system has continued. And the dollar being the main currency in the world is enormously important to us.
Agreed.
Right? So I would be very, very careful about upsetting that system. Reforms have to be done with a tender touch there, okay?
Yeah, I'll sort of agree with that. I will say if we don't reform the system, it will go away and it will be cataclysmic for the US on the world stage, for sure. And every empire, I don't know what you want to call America now, but every empire that's ever had a reserve currency ever throughout all of human history has printed their way into oblivion. Everyone, there's no exceptions. So I don't want to get on my soapbox because it's not often that I get to sit across from you. But my audience knows well my soapbox around printing money. They have drinking games around it, and I'm worried that they will die of alcohol poisoning.
But Tom, I actually totally agree with you. Like, that doesn't mean Bitcoin is the answer in my world. And it doesn't mean that we need to do drastic reform overnight, because that could really overturn the apple cart in a disastrous way.
Oh, we agree.
Okay. But I fundamentally agree with you that nonstop printing of money will catch up with you, and it's going to leave a mark.
Here is my core thesis. You and I both want the same thing. We want middle income, average people to thrive. And I'll define thriving, where over time they are making more and more money and they are convinced that their kids' lives will be even better than theirs. When you go through a period like that, it is fucking glorious. And also that they feel safe. I think that's incredibly important. Cool. That's it. That's all I'm trying to help people get to. And when you print money, the fundamental thing you're doing is saying, and these are my words, when money is printed, you are stealing money from everybody that holds the US dollar or debt, US debt, from everybody. So it could be China, right? They hold a ton of debt. Everybody that holds it, you're stealing from them. So the nice thing about being the reserve currency is you're not just stealing from your own people, you're stealing from everybody else. You don't have to have them vote for it though. And so by my book, that's pretty fucking sinister. And so now, guess who you hurt the most? You hurt the poor people the most, because when you take their buying power, they don't have a cushion that the rich people have. I'm speaking as a rich person who actually fucking benefits from money printing, and I'm screaming from the rooftops, for the love of God, please stop, because this is why people actually kill the rich, because you create a system where they cannot fucking get ahead. So it goes like this. I know you know this, but just to throw it out so everybody hears it. When you're printing money, the way that the same amount is in the person's bank account. Let's say they have $100. They still have $100, but $100 buys now $90 worth of stuff, and then 80, and then 70, and just on down. They still have 100 though. Now you can put money back into the system, but the only way that you put money back into the system is by buying debt. So now if you weren't holding debt, there's no way for them to get that money into the system, which there's a name for it, the Cantillon effect or whatever the fuck it's called. And so people closest who know what they're going to buy, they get their stuff bought. And so now that upper echelon of people, they end up getting richer and richer and richer. That's way one that they get richer. The second way that they get richer is as you devalue the currency, things that you hold that are assets go up in value. Not really, they just go up in value in the proportion that the buying power of the dollar goes down. So if you have a house, then your house goes from $200,000 to $500,000 to $1 million over enough years. It's still worth the same. It's just that the dollar is worth a lot less. So it takes a lot more dollars to buy the same house. So by owning assets, you have a hedge against the fact that they're printing money. Now, the problem is 50% of Americans don't have assets. So you keep getting this fucking runaway divide between the rich and the poor, but it's all born of fucking money printing. And so, dude, this is one I really feel like I'm screaming into a tornado and people just cannot hear what I'm saying, that the money printing is the problem. Now, to make it even worse, we've gotten ourselves already in a situation where if you don't print money, the short-term problem is so brutal that they're going to keep printing money. And I get it. The short-term problem would be so fucking brutal. I get why they're printing money. But Jesus, if we can't get out of that system somehow, some way. So people talk about Bitcoin as a lifeboat. I fucking hate that language, by the way, because that still means most people on Titanic fucking die. So I'm not super keen, but at least there's something anyway. It does need to be Bitcoin. Money printing is where I want people to focus. So you and I both want middle class, average, everyday person who fucking works their ass off, trying to make ends meet for their family. We want to create a system where if they work and they're diligent, that they're going to make more money and that their kids are going to do even better than them. Boom. Nice and easy. Now, I think where we start to disagree is that I am suspicious of oligarchs. I am suspicious of money in politics. I think it's wildly deranging, deeply problematic, and we need to get it the fuck out. However, I think that companies are the economic engine that will allow your average person to make more money and their kids to do even better. It's obviously an oversimplification, but without a thriving economy, there's a reason that America is the number one economy in the world. And if we don't do things that are good for the economy, we're really going to be in trouble. And I get anybody that looks at all these billionaires with a side eye, but man, if you take somebody like Mark Andreessen, I don't know if he's going to love me bringing him up and dragging him into this fight, but is Mark a flawed person? Probably. I don't know him very well. But when I really look at the way that he talks about how to think about your own life, how to think about getting educated, how to teach your children, how to run a company, fuck, man, it's all real and it's good. And if you do it in your own life, these are things he says for free, it will make you better at controlling your own life, controlling your education, building a company if that's what you want to do. And he's one of the people that's talking to Trump and saying, we need to do these things. And so, and fucking Elon, dude, even if Elon was like, deregulate my company so I can keep doing more, there's no one in my lifetime who's better executed against grand ideas than him. So we've got a group of people that, even when they're being selfish, have delivered the world pretty incredible things. I don't mind if people look sideways at social media. Maybe that was a little weird. But boy, oh boy, it can break bad. There's no doubt. And these guys are going to be selfish 1,000%. But my whole thing on humans is the only thing you can guarantee is that people are going to be selfish. So if you can align your selfish desires, you've got a shot. So my optimism is entirely around not believing that they're being altruistic, but believing that the things they want are actually good for the economy, and that we'll need a booming economy that isn't deranged by corporate dollars, but we need a booming economy that is immediately accessible by the middle class.
So when you said now we'll diverge, before you said that, everything you said before then, I agree 100% with. Okay. So, but I'll flesh that out for you. On the left, there's Stephanie Kelton, who came up with an interesting modern monetary theory. And what that basically says is printing money is no big deal and deficits don't matter. On the right, Dick Cheney said the same thing. Deficits don't matter. And there's a famous moment where he whispers that in Bush's ear while they're actually in a meeting and they're on air. And so both of those folks I don't agree with. I think it's just a matter of simple logic, economics, etc. Printing money ad infinitum leads to guaranteed disaster, right? So we're totally aligned on that. I'll give you one more data point there. So I interviewed Ray Dalio, legendary investor.
Love Ray.
Yeah. And what I love about Ray Dalio is how logical he is. And so I deeply respect that brother. Okay. So, and again, it doesn't mean that he's an angel. It doesn't mean any of these folks are angels. But with the very limited experience I've had with him, he's a good guy, but most importantly, logical, is going to do things that make sense. So I talked to him about the Federal Reserve, and he had actually lost all of his money in the very beginning. He considers it his biggest mistake. What he didn't realize was that the Fed was going to come in and print more money. And so now that, of course, then he adjusted for that, made an enormous amount of money, et cetera. But we got to the point where I then asked him, I said, okay, now the Federal Reserve already bailed out the banks, and then it printed more money. And then whenever we run into trouble, COVID, it prints more money. And I said, so what if we run into a giant economic problem and the Federal Reserve has to print even more money? What do you think will happen? And he said, I think we're out of bullets. And so if they go to print money on a mass scale again, I think we're going to run into a giant problem. Okay. And so I believe that. I think that's true. I think that's logical. I think we're a little bit on the Titanic here, but it's been such a long journey that people forget that there's still an iceberg out there and they think we're unsinkable. So we're super aligned on that. And we've got to find a way to get that back under control and not have it just serve the 7 banks, but actually serve the American people, et cetera, et cetera. So now when you get into the divergence, and let's take a couple of examples. Are all companies evil? No, of course not. That's ridiculous. You run a company, I run a company. They're not evil companies. We have a sponsor aspiration. They're good guys. They're trying to help the world. You can go on and on, right? So do we need corporations? We do. But our founding fathers said it well. They said it was at best a necessary evil. And they said, be super careful because corporations will accumulate a lot of money and a lot of power, and then they will work against democracy. Oh my God, they were totally right. They were 100% right. And if you remember in the American Revolution, they're not just going against the British Empire, they're going against the British East India Company. In fact, the Boston Tea Party is a revolt not against the empire, but against that particular corporation. They throw their tea, their product, into the harbor in a revolt against corporate rule that the British Empire has imposed upon the colonies. So they were right about their warning. And it is true that it is necessary, but we have to be inordinately careful with corporations, and we have not been. So how do you be careful? Well, right now we only have one line of code for corporations: maximize profit. That is a super dangerous line of code. And on the one hand, it makes perfect sense. It's you funnel people's natural selfishness into a productive avenue so that it could create income and revenue and improve the economy, create jobs, etc. On the other hand, it starts a greed machine. And that greed machine grows and grows and grows and is only interested in itself and only interested in maximizing profit. Other countries and other systems have put in 2 or 3 lines of code. Yes, you should maximize profit, but you should also care about stakeholders. You have to care about the community. And what does that mean to care about the community? There's certain guidelines. So you don't, well, if I want to maximize profit and I have a toxic product, well, I dump it into the river, I'm going to make a lot more money because instead of treating the toxic chemicals, and that's going to cost me a lot of money, and make sure you dispose of them properly, just get rid of them, right? So I maximize profit. If that's your only line of code, we're screwed. Other countries say, no, you cannot poison the rivers, etc. Now you say, like, we say that too. Barely. That's the regulation that we talked about earlier. And now Trump, Musk, and everybody's saying, deregulate. You don't even need those tiny amount of regulations. Get rid of it all. Let corporations be above the law. Super dangerous. Not because there shouldn't be corporations, but because I believe in democratic capitalism. Again, it's a concept I explained in my book. And what I mean by democratic capitalism is we have capitalism, but it's checked by democracy. That our government officials, our politicians, our representatives are supposed to make sure that those corporations do not rob us blind. Because the corporations are perfectly capable of looking out for their own interests. We don't have to worry about that, right? We have to worry that our representatives in government look out for our interests, right? So then what that creates is balance. But right now, we don't have that balance. So what does that lead to? I'll give you a specific example. And now a lot of right-wing populists are mad about this. This is the first time I realized the right-wing populists were headed in an interesting and potentially productive direction, is when Charlie Kirk came on our show in the Republican convention. And I forget if he brought it up or I brought it up. But we started talking about how private equity, BlackRock, et cetera, are buying all the residential real estate in the country. And he said, I hate that. I was like, you hate that? I couldn't believe it because my whole life, right-wing media and Republican politicians have been like, of course, corporations should get everything and the average American should get nothing and like it, okay? And you're going to be our indentured servant and you're going to like it. Because if they keep buying up the homes, that is the place where we create most wealth for the average American, for the middle class in America. And what they are seeing in private equity is something that is logical, that will help them maximize profit. If they buy all the homes, they create the wealth, they take it instead of the average American. And then they make you a renter, and that ties you more into being an indentured servant for corporations. And then they get the rent money, they get the accumulation of wealth from the real estate. Now, if we don't have any regulations, and we say companies are a good thing, their self-interest will eventually lead to the positive results for average American, that would be a dramatic mistake. And that's the mistake we're making right now. And we need the government to look out for us. They're supposed to be our representatives. I know they haven't been for so long that we've forgotten that they're supposed to be our representatives, but we're supposed to send them in to have the power to contain the worst impulses of those corporations. So right now, what we should have, and we have a populist plank on tyt.com, and it's 6 policies that I think almost everyone in the country agrees with. Negotiate drug prices, anti-war, I can go on, right? But one of them is ban private equity from buying residential real estate. So that would be democratic capitalism, where you go, no, this is a line you cannot, thou shalt not pass. Because if they take our homes from us, we are forever fucked.
Yeah. So first of all, I definitely agree that you don't want no regulation. I'm in your dad's camp of there is such a thing as too much and there is such a thing as too little. Totally agree on that. The only twist in the BlackRock thing, though, I also hate the idea of them buying up homes. Would love to see something put in place for that. Is the bigger beef that I have is BlackRock is simply an aggregator of shareholders. So technically, BlackRock doesn't own those things. The shareholders own those things, and anybody can be a shareholder of BlackRock. My bigger problem is that 50% of Americans don't own stocks. And so we've created a system where you have to flee money. You can't save your way to success because of money printing. You will literally be punished for saving money, which I think is immoral, whole nother soapbox. But at a minimum, if you're not teaching people about how to buy stocks when they're in like middle school, high school, just obsessively educating them on how to do that, index funds, things that are low volatility, long-term plays, minimize risk as much as possible. I'm not talking about turning people into day traders. Then now you're doubly fucked. So anyway, I don't want to see BlackRock gobble those things up for the same reason. Homes are no longer a grand slam in terms of saving your wealth, but that's again a different conversation. But yeah, it's interesting. This is a very interesting conversation because we see so many things the same way, but from a slightly different angle, which I love. Let me ask, there's some fun things that I've got to get your take on. You brought up TikTok. What is really going on with TikTok? What should we ban it? Is it a Chinese spy device? Like, how should we be thinking about that?
No, the campaign against TikTok is 98% bullshit. We definitely should not ban it. It would be a massive violation of the First Amendment. The government has no business doing that. The Supreme Court should have never allowed it. I mean, the Supreme Court's so out of control. Like, that's another soapbox, another conversation. I think the Supreme Court has ruined this country. And you'll be surprised if you're a right wing to hear me say it's the activist judges that ruined this country. And so, but what you don't realize is that they're activists on behalf of corporations, and they've given them every advantage and the average American no advantage. So it drives me crazy. Anyway, when it comes to TikTok, they say, oh, we're worried that the Chinese government can get our private information. So we're not worried that Zuckerberg can get our private information because he has the same exact access from Meta and, Instagram, Facebook. So we're not worried that Elon can have our information. He has the same access as TikTok does on X, right? So wait, are we worried about the private information being in the hands of X, Y, or Z, or are we not worried about it? No, that's not what this is about. There's a couple of the real reasons for the TikTok ban. Number one, and this is not speculation and it's not a conspiracy theory, Mitt Romney told Anthony Blinken, and Anthony Blinken agreed. It's on tape, and we've shown it several times on the Young Turks. He said, the Israelis used to be really good at PR. I don't know what happened. And now they're losing the PR battle. So that's why we got to go after TikTok. And I was like, I can't believe he just said it. Okay. So, and the ADL put out a statement saying there's all these things that are pro-Palestinian and only a small amount that are pro-Israel. So TikTok's a real problem. No, brother, that's not a problem. The problem is that Israel's slaughtering the Palestinians and people are upset about it and they're making normal videos and they're showing it. The problem is that you can't control the message anymore and it's driving you freaking crazy. So the real country that has a much larger factor in TikTok is not China, it's Israel. And you have to remember, Netanyahu is a war criminal despised by the whole world and deeply unpopular everywhere, including in Israel. And our, 80% of our politicians give him standing ovation after standing ovation. Why? AIPAC poured in hundreds of millions of dollars to buy our Congress. Washington is occupied territory. They're not going after TikTok because of China. They're going after TikTok because of Israel. But that's not the only reason. Secondly, and Scott Galloway made this point. I got it from him, and I think it was a real brilliant point. I hadn't thought of it before. There's a huge regulatory overhang over TikTok, meaning that its price is artificially depressed by about 25%. But you could agree or disagree on the percentage, but you get it. Why? Because the government is constantly threatening to ban it. Once that regulatory overhang is lifted, it's going to go up about 25% in value. That is at a bare minimum $10 billion, at a bare minimum, right? So at the minute an American corporation or a wealthy American buys it, they make $10, $20 billion overnight. So every American corporation, which again, Washington's occupied territory, they're owned by corporations. Every corporation is saying, oh yeah, China's a real national security threat. Hey, you guys all do business with China. Shh. You guys all sell cars and all this stuff and you import stuff. Well, if it's such a national security threat, why are you doing business with them? Shh. No. They got to sell it. Who should they sell it to? Me. Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. So it's a giant scam for some corporation or wealthy person in America to make an unbelievable amount of money. Plus, it helps Israel to ban TikTok. So that's the real reasons.
Now, let's say that it was an Israeli-owned company and they were pumping in pro-Israel content. Would it make sense to you then to say, hey, this is a foreign national that owns this. We think they're using it to manipulate our youth. Would you then agree like, yo, we've got to get this out of foreign ownership?
Wow, what a wild hypothetical where American media companies might be working on behalf of Israel. I just can't wrap my head around it. That's every other media company in the country. It's not because they're owned by Israel. It's the groupthink again. Israel is our beloved special ally, blah, 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 blah. That's why shut up and give me your money. I got to send it over to Israel. Okay. And we've been doing that. We've now sent $300 billion to Israel. Jesus Christ, when is it enough? So I don't want people to go down a dark path and blame religion or anything like that and get into conspiracy theories. It's just simple logic. If you allow for complete bribery, you're going to have complete bribery. And what I'm amazed that other knucklehead countries haven't figured out what the same thing Israel does. You got a Chinese national here, you got a Saudi national here. They're American citizens, right? But they originally came from, or they just relate, empathize with Saudi Arabia or Peru. Pick a country, right? And you just get them because they can give unlimited bribes to American politicians thanks to the Supreme Court. You give them $200 million and then they give the politicians $200 million and then you own this country. Peru can buy America. Any country can buy America. Israel was just smart enough to do it. So, I mean, I don't hate the player. I hate the game, right? So now to your point, though, to the core of what if a foreign government was doing X, Y, or Z? But if people really had that legitimate concern and that was what was driving them, then wouldn't they be concerned about all of the pro-Israel money going to buy our actual government? Forget a company that might have access to some of your information. They have access to the entire United States government. They have been bought lock, stock, and barrel. So if you actually cared about a foreign influence, all the Russian people, right? The MSNBC and Rachel Maddow, oh, Russia's going to control us. And in 2016, they had 4 million tweets. So I had other problems with Russia and Trump, but I was like, I know they didn't coordinate because Roger Stone tried to find out information about whether the Russians had hacked into Hillary Clinton. If they were coordinating, he wouldn't have tried to find out that information, right? And then the government came in with, oh, they had 4 million, their propaganda had 4 million impressions on Twitter. I was like, that's Tuesday for me. Like, wow, big Russian interference, right? Meanwhile, Israel's pouring in hundreds of millions of dollars to buy our entire Congress. And it was like, I don't see it. I don't see it. The real problem is Russia. The real problem is China. No, bullshit. They don't mean a word of it. So but okay, even so, you say, all right, what should we do? Because China does have access to that information, we think, potentially, although the servers are actually in Texas. So, okay, then why don't we have a rule that applies evenly and fairly to all the social media companies? So if you say, hey, the owners of TikTok cannot access this or cannot use the information for that, right? Then have it apply to Facebook, have it apply to YouTube, have it apply to X. Don't tell me, no, everybody else can get your private information, do whatever the hell you like with it, but only TikTok can because I'm concerned about China. No, then do fair and even rules for everyone.
What if the fair and even rule broke along the lines of if they're a foreign company and we are in, I don't know what standing they would put it in, but I consider us to be in a Cold War with China. Mm-hmm. So I may be simply the person that is totally into that cover story. But when I heard that, I was like, ooh, that's actually interesting. I think the next 10 years are really going to be like the 80s with us and Russia. And especially given the weakness of the dollar because of all the printing, China is a pure competitor economically. They are in their own region, probably militarily stronger than we are, not globally, but in their region. So it seems to me that there is certainly reason to be thoughtful about somebody that can map everybody's face, that can influence them with an algorithm. But I'm not sure where I fall on the TikTok issue. And my whole thinking is all about the China connection. I'm not even thinking about Israel.
No, I hear you. And look, so I don't want people to get obsessed about Israel. I'm just saying this one of many factors, and it shows the hypocrisy, right? But Elon Musk can have the same access, and he is the largest donor to the president of the United States. That seems to also be a giant problem. But we say, oh, no, since he's an American, the problem disappears. It doesn't really. We're just choosing not to focus on that. We're choosing to focus on TikTok. So on China, I'm not in the same place you are. I'm a realist about China, but I don't think we have to go to a Cold War, a hot war. I don't know why we're constantly talking about the military. Why don't we just have an economic battle with China? Why do we have to have a military battle with China?
Hopefully that's all it ever is.
But yeah, I don't want why are we demagoguing? Why are Chinese Communist Party? They're not communists. They haven't been communists in a long time, right? So they have centralized planning, but they have these giant corporations that are making tons and tons of money. Everybody's getting rich in China. Now we got a middle class. So that you throw communists in there to rile people up. Oh, they're the evil enemy and stuff. Look, no, they're looking out for their own self-interest. They're very good at looking out for their own self-interest. We have to be clear-eyed about that. And I think a lot of politicians before Trump, and this is one of the things I'll give Trump credit for, he's actually, negotiating on our behalf. And he's using our leverage, and he's pushing back. So that I like, and I've been, and I call that out on TYT as well. So if you say China comes in and goes, all right, I'm going to put these tariffs on you, and I'm going to support my industry by pouring in this much money into my industry, and then we're going to drive prices down, and then we're going to bankrupt you, and then we're going to take you over. Well, then you do exactly what they do. You mirror image. So I'm not saying don't worry about it. I'm not saying they're not a competitor. I'm not saying we shouldn't respond to their unfair practices. I'm saying, why don't we just do the same exact thing back at them without escalating, without talking about the military, without demagoguing and et cetera, just kick their ass economically, right? And let's have a real battle. And I believe in America. I think in the long run, China's not really our top competitor at all. I think, look, maybe this makes me more of a capitalist than the average right winger or whatever. The labels aren't that important, but I believe in capitalism. And I think centralized planning in the long run is a terrible idea. In the short run, it can be spectacularly successful, as China just showed with incredible growth in a tiny amount of time. That's what centralized planning is great at. But over time, it breeds endless corruption and endless wrong decision because you're not using the wisdom of the crowd, right? And anytime you have a gatekeeper making decisions, it's always wrong. I wrote an email to my friends in 1998 saying online video will beat television. And at that point, online video barely existed.
That's very prescient.
And then we started Young Turks to do online video back in 2002. We were the first YouTube partner, longest running internet show. Why am I telling you that in the context of China? Because the reason I had that belief was because I knew that the gatekeepers in entertainment were not very good at their job. And that the wisdom of the crowd would always beat the gatekeepers. And what I realized is in online video, there aren't going to be gatekeepers, especially at least for a long, long time. And the wisdom of the crowd is going to elevate the best hosts, right? And give you the most compelling content. And that turned out to be true. Same thing for China versus America. Their centralized planning might do great in the beginning, but it'll fall apart and their biggest advantage will turn into their biggest disadvantage. Our actual competitor 50 years from now is India. India has enormous energy, enormous entrepreneurial spirit. It's a beautiful and disastrous chaos, right? It's got huge upsides, huge downsides within that chaotic energy in India. But India is going to rise up and be bigger than China and be our real competitor. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Talk to me about the Sig Heil heard around the world from Elon Musk. How do you read that? Goofy signal, dog whistle?
No, so I don't think he's a Nazi. I don't even think it's a dog whistle, but I do think it was intentional. I think it was trolling. It was a spectacular case of trolling. He wanted the attention. Elon has decided, and it's not necessarily an incorrect decision, that the most valuable commodity in America is attention. And that's why he massively overpaid for X, because he wanted it so bad, because he understands it has the mother lode of the commodity that he wants, attention. And so what are we talking about after the inauguration? We barely talked about the executive orders. We didn't talk about Trump's speech at all, but we are talking about what Elon did. Okay. And when you troll, you build in plausible deniability. Oh, I was touching my heart. Oh, I'm a little awkward. And so here I can prove my credibility because I've defended the right-wing actors before, when like Laura Ingraham, for example, raised her arms at the RNC and people are like, oh, that looks like a Nazi salute. I'm like, guys, anyone who raises their arm at any kind of angle can look like a Nazi salute. She didn't do a Nazi salute. That wasn't even close. So in this case, though, man, he snapped that thing. I mean, that was right out of 1930s Germany. And if that was an accidental, autistic moment of exuberance, holy cow, what a coincidence that it turned into something that looks identical to the Sieg Heil Nazi salute, right? So I think what is more logical and likely is that he thought about it and he thought, if I put my heart, in fact, he does it twice if you watch a second version of the clip. So he does it to the crowd. That's the one that everybody sees. And then there's another video where he turns around to the people behind the podium and does it again. And Anna and I disagreed about this on the Young Turks, but the way that I saw it, he didn't put his hand on his heart when he did the second one. And he forgot that he was supposed to do that for his excuse. So after he pointed the second time, then he put his hand on his heart, right? And so I nitpicking in that particular part. But overall, I think it was epic trolling, not in a good way. You don't do that. You don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. What do you? All right, you've got enough attention. For God's sake, it's enough, right? So, but I know people get super touchy about it. Oh, and in fact, I said this online. Got attacked by both sides. Okay, why? Because the right-wing tribe says, you said Nazi. Everybody always calls us Nazis. I hate you. It's bullshit. He didn't do it. He didn't do it. He was just, oh, my heart, my warm heart. It was about, all right, guys, if you believe it, God bless your heart, okay? And then the left wing said, what do you mean he's not a Nazi? What do you mean he's just trolling? He's definitely a Nazi. You don't call him a Nazi. You're on the right wing. That's it. We knew it. You love Trump. And you're giving Elon an excuse and you're not calling him a Nazi when everybody knows he's a Nazi.
That's so interesting to me. To me, it really did just look like this super awkward guy doing like heart version of a blown kiss. I had no idea. Like I watched it, didn't even make my radar, had no idea. And then the next day saw the hullabaloo about it. Very, very fascinating. Our frame of reference controls not only what we look at, but what we see.
Yeah. Tom, I'll say one last thing about that. No one actually knows. Right. The only person who knows is Elon.
True.
So if you say, and I got into this debate on Piers this morning, if you say, hey, Cenk, you're reading his mind, but you're also reading his mind.
No, 100%.
Right. You're reading, and I'm not saying you in particular, I'm saying the people who think that he wasn't doing it on purpose.
I am for sure.
Yeah. They're saying, I assume he had good intent. I assume he didn't mean to do it to get attention. And I'm assuming he did it to get attention, but we're both assuming. We don't know. We're just going based on our experience, our perspective, and what it looked like to us.
No doubt. Cenk, this has been a lot of fun, man. Thank you so much. Where can people follow you?
So Young Turks is on almost every platform. TYT is on almost every platform. So we have a 24-hour channel on YouTube TV, Roku, Samsung, etc. We're obviously on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. But really the main thing is Young Turks every day, Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. If you want to find an easy way to do it, Young Turks on YouTube. Everybody knows that. You go there, and at 6 o'clock Eastern every day, we give you the real news. As you can tell from here, we're honest. We pull no punches. Agree or disagree, you know we're not BSing you. And then we really care about delivering for our audience. And then our website's tyt.com. So That's where we have the Populist plank that you could sign on for. That's where you could find out more and be part of our community.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for taking the time today. Boys and girls, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Peace. If you like this conversation, check out this episode to learn more. Tomorrow, the president is going to get a briefing from the CIA on his desk. What should be in that briefing?
That's a great question. It's going to be a different briefing than it was yesterday, which is, it goes without saying, but at the same time, what we're